My new wife's son called. I'm getting married tomorrow. I withdrew all the money from your bank accounts and sold the house. Bye. I just laughed. He didn't know that the house was actually... The phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the time because I'd been staring at my watch, counting down the minutes until I could leave the office. 43 minutes, until I could walk out of the fluorescent-lit box that smelled perpetually of burnt coffee and corporate ambition, drive home through the evening traffic, and pour myself something strong enough to burn away the taste of another meaningless day. The number that flashed across my screen was one I'd programmed in 2 years ago, right after the wedding. Marcus StepSon, it read. Clinical, distant, accurate. I should have known then. Should have felt it in my bones, that electric premonition that precedes disaster. But I was tired, and Thursday afternoons have a way of making you stupid. And so I answered, "Hey Marcus, everything okay?" His voice came through crystalline and cold, each word pronounced with the kind of careful enunciation people use when they want you to understand exactly what they're saying, when they want every syllable to land like a fist. "Robert, I'm calling to let you know I'm getting married tomorrow." I blinked, waited. The pause stretched between us, like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. "Oh, congratulations. That's sudden. Does your mother know?" He laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh you hear in movies right before someone does something irreversible, something that will haunt them or free them or damn them forever. Mom knows everything I need her to know, but that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I wanted to be the one to tell you I've withdrawn all the money from your bank accounts. Your savings, your checking, everything. I also sold the house, the one you thought was yours. The papers went through this morning. The office suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear my own breathing, hear the hum of my computer, hear the distant murmur of Janet from accounting talking too loudly on her phone 3 cubicles over. My hand tightened around my cell phone until my knuckles went white. "You did what?" You heard me. "Consider it a wedding gift. To myself. Oh, and don't bother coming home tonight. Technically, it's not your home anymore. The new owners take possession at midnight. I've already had the locks changed, just to be safe. Your things are in storage unit 247 at public storage on Miller Avenue. I paid for 3 months. After that, they'll auction it off. But I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're a resourceful guy, right? If you've ever had the ground pulled out from under you, I mean really pulled, not just metaphorically, but in that visceral way that makes your stomach drop and your vision tunnel and your entire world compress into a single point of awful clarity, then you know what I felt in that moment. Marcus, I don't know what your mother told you, but my mother told me plenty. She told me how you manipulated her, how you isolated her from our family, how you've been controlling her finances since day one. She told me everything, Robert. Everything. And I'm done watching her suffer. My mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not... Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear how you're the victim, or how you love her, or any of the other lies you've been feeding everyone. I know the truth now. We all do. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave her alone. You're going to sign whatever divorce papers her lawyer sends you. You're going to disappear. And if you try to fight this, if you try to cause problems, I promise you, you will regret it. Marcus, listen to me. No, I'm done listening. I've listened for 2 years. 2 years of watching you parade around like you belong in our family. 2 years of pretending to be civil while you slowly destroyed my mother. But I'm 28 years old now, Robert. I'm not a kid anymore. And I finally have the power to do something about this. The line clicked. He was gone. I sat there in my cubicle, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. Around me, the office continued its Thursday afternoon rhythm. Keyboards clacked, phones rang. Someone laughed at something someone else said. The world kept spinning, oblivious to the fact that mine had just stopped. And then, slowly, a smile started to spread across my face. I started to laugh. It began as a chuckle, low and quiet, barely more than a breath. But it grew, it built. It erupted from somewhere deep in my chest, spilling out into the corporate air with the kind of wild abandon that makes people stop and stare, which they did. Janet poked her head over the cubicle wall, her eyebrows raised in concern. "Robert, you okay?" I waved her off, still laughing, tears now streaming down my face. "I'm fine," I managed to gasp between breaths. "I'm absolutely fine." She retreated, clearly unconvinced, probably already drafting the email to HR about the guy in sales who might be having a breakdown. But I couldn't stop. The laughter kept coming, rolling through me in waves, each one stronger than the last. Because Marcus, sweet, righteous, vindictive Marcus, had just made the biggest mistake of his entitled life. And he had no idea. Let me take you back. Let me tell you how we got here. Because context is everything, and this story doesn't start with a phone call. It starts 2 years earlier, on a Saturday morning in June, with the smell of coffee and the sound of rain against windows. I was 52 years old, divorced for 7 years, 2 grown daughters who called on holidays, and my birthday, predictable as clockwork, dutiful as soldiers. A job I didn't love, but didn't hate. A small apartment that felt emptier every year. A life that had settled into the comfortable numbness of routine. Then I met Diane at a gallery opening downtown. She was standing in front of a massive abstract painting, the kind that's all bold colors and chaotic brushstrokes and makes you feel something even if you can't articulate what. She wore a cream-colored dress that looked expensive, had her dark hair pulled back in a way that showed off elegant cheekbones, and she was crying. Not sobbing, not making a scene, just crying. Tears sliding down her face while she stared at this explosion of red and gold on canvas. I couldn't walk past her. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was the way she stood straight-backed and dignified even in her grief. Maybe it was because I recognized that particular brand of sadness, the kind that ambushes you in public places when you let your guard down for just a moment. "Are you all right?" I asked, immediately feeling stupid. Obviously, she wasn't all right. She turned to me, and I saw her eyes gray-green, like the ocean right before a storm, and she smiled. Actually smiled, even with tears still wet on her face. "I'm fine," she said. "It's just, my husband used to paint. Nothing like this. He did watercolors, mostly. Landscapes. Lighthouses. Very Bob Ross, actually. But he loved it. And he loved coming to galleries like this, just looking at art, talking about technique and emotion, and all the things I never quite understood. He died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. And I thought I was past the ambush crying stage, but apparently not. I didn't offer platitudes. I'd learned, after my own divorce, after my father's death, after all the small griefs that accumulate like dust in the corners of a life, that platitudes are the enemy of genuine connection. Instead, I said, "Do you want to get out of here? There's a coffee place 2 blocks away that makes an obscenely good cappuccino." She looked at me for a long moment, assessing, deciding. Then, she nodded. That was how it started. 3 weeks later, we had our first official date. 6 months after that, she invited me to meet her son. Marcus was 26 then, a recent MBA graduate with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never having been truly challenged. He worked in tech consulting, wore expensive suits, drove a BMW his mother had bought him for graduation. He shook my hand with just a little too much pressure, held eye contact just a little too long, smiled with too many teeth. "So you're the guy dating my mom," he said over dinner at a steakhouse he'd chosen, at a table he'd reserved, in a conversation he clearly intended to dominate. "I am," I said. "What do you do?" "I'm in medical device sales. Make good money?" Diane's hand tensed on her wine glass. "Marcus." "It's okay," I told her. To him, I said, "I do well enough. I'm comfortable." He nodded slowly, like a prosecutor acknowledging a witness's testimony before destroying it. "Mom's comfortable too. My dad left her very well taken care of. She doesn't need anyone to take care of her financially." The subtext was clear as glass. "She doesn't need you." I smiled. "Good. Then she can be with me because she wants to be." not because she needs to be. That's the best kind of relationship, don't you think? Something flickered in his eyes. Anger? Frustration? The realization that I wasn't going to play his game? The dinner continued, polite and pointed, a chess match, disguised as a meal. By the time we said goodbye, I knew Marcus saw me as a threat. I also knew, with the quiet certainty that comes from years of reading people, that he would become a problem. I just didn't know how big a problem. Diane and I got married 14 months later, in a small ceremony at a vineyard upstate. My daughters came, polite and pleasant, already starting to warm to Diane after several careful coffee dates and phone calls. Marcus came too, wearing a gray suit and a fixed smile, making a toast that was technically generous but felt like a warning. To Robert, he said, raising his glass, "Welcome to the family. I hope you know what you're getting into." Everyone laughed. I knew it wasn't a joke. But I loved Diane. God, I loved her. She was brilliant and funny and could be unexpectedly silly after 2 glasses of wine. She read mystery novels and watched terrible reality TV and made the best lasagna I'd ever tasted. She talked about her late husband without bitterness, with a kind of grateful nostalgia that made me like him even though we'd never met. She fit into my life like a piece I hadn't known was missing. And I thought naively, stupidly, that Marcus would come around. That time would soften him. That he'd see I wasn't trying to replace his father, wasn't trying to steal his mother, was just trying to build something good with someone I loved. I was wrong. 6 months into the marriage, things started to shift. Diane became distant, distracted. She started spending more time with Marcus, meeting him for lunch, talking on the phone in hushed tones when she thought I couldn't hear. She questioned things she'd never questioned before, why I wanted to consolidate our finances, why I suggested selling her old house and buying something together, why I thought we should update her will. "Marcus thinks I'm moving too fast," she told me one night, over dinner. "He thinks I should keep some independence, keep things separate, just in case." "Just in case what?" I asked. Keeping my voice level, she looked away. "He's just looking out for me." That was when I started to understand. Marcus wasn't protecting his mother. He was protecting his inheritance. The house. Diane lived in the house her first husband had bought 30 years ago. The house that had appreciated into a small fortune in the crazy Seattle real estate market wasn't just a house. It was a symbol. It was security. It was the physical manifestation of everything his father had built. And I was the interloper who might somehow claim a piece of it. Never mind that I'd never asked Diane for anything. Never mind that I paid my own way, kept my own accounts, hadn't even suggested adding my name to the deed. In Marcus's mind, I was a gold digger, a manipulator, a con man in a long con, and he was going to expose me. Sitting in my cubicle, phone still in my hand, I thought about all of this, about the past 2 years of careful navigation, of trying to build trust with a man who had decided from day one that I was the enemy. About the gradual erosion of my marriage as Marcus whispered poison in his mother's ear, planting seeds of doubt that grew into forests of suspicion. About last week, when Diane asked me to move into the guest room just for a while. About 3 days ago, when I found divorce papers in her nightstand drawer, already signed, just waiting for my signature. About yesterday, when I realized Marcus had somehow gained access to her financial accounts, had somehow convinced her to make him power of attorney, had somehow orchestrated the perfect storm to remove me from their lives completely. And I started laughing again. Because Marcus had made one critical, unforgivable error. He'd assumed I was stupid. He'd assumed I hadn't seen this coming from a mile away. He'd assumed that the house he'd just sold, the house that had been in Diane's name for 3 decades, the house that represented his entire inheritance, was actually worth the $2.4 million the sale papers said it was worth. What Marcus didn't know, what Diane didn't know because she'd never bothered to look closely at the documents she'd signed, what nobody knew except me and my lawyer and the county recorder's office, was that the house hadn't been in Diane's name for 6 months. It had been in mine. The real one. The one I'd bought myself, with cash, before we even got married. The one that looked exactly like Diane's house, on the same street, with the same floor plan, just 3 doors down. The house Marcus had just sold? That was Diane's, the worthless one, the one I'd carefully, legally, meticulously saddled with $2.3 million in liens, second mortgages, and debt secured against the property. The buyer would find out in about 72 hours, right after the sale closed, that they'd just purchased a house worth maybe $100,000 in actual equity. And Marcus, who'd forged power of attorney documents to make the sale happen. Marcus had just committed wire fraud, real estate fraud, and about 6 other felonies I could think of off the top of my head. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Tom," I said when he answered. "It's time." He took the bait. "Start phase 2. Then I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and smiled. This was going to be one hell of a story. I didn't go home that night. There was no home to go to, technically speaking, though the irony wasn't lost on me. Instead, I drove to the Marriott downtown, checked into a room with a view of the city lights, and ordered room service, a burger that cost $38 and tasted like cardboard, and a whiskey that cost $16 and tasted like vindication. Tom called back at 7:15 p.m. "I've filed the fraud complaints with the DA's office," he said, his voice carrying that particular satisfaction lawyers get when everything is proceeding exactly according to plan. "Also submitted the documentation to the Real Estate Commission and the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. The forgery on the power of attorney documents is particularly damning. I've also prepared the emergency motion to freeze all assets involved in the transaction. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning." What about the buyer? "I've already had my paralegal reach out to their attorney, gave them a courtesy heads up that the sale is fraudulent and that the property is encumbered beyond its value. They're not going to be happy, but they'll be directing their anger at Marcus, not you, especially once they realize he misrepresented the title status." I took a sip of whiskey, felt it burn its way down. "And Diane?" A pause. Tom had been my lawyer for 15 years, had handled my first divorce, had drafted my will, had witnessed the signing of my prenuptial agreement with Diane. The one Marcus had convinced her meant I was trying to steal from her rather than protect us both. He knew the whole story. He also knew the parts that hurt most weren't the legal ones. "Robert, you're sure about this? Once we pull this trigger, there's no walking it back. You're not just exposing Marcus, you're exposing everything, including her role in this. She signed the papers, Tom. She gave him power of attorney. She chose to believe his lies over 2 years of me showing her who I actually was. I'm done being the villain in their story." "All right, then we proceed. But for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. This kid needs to learn that actions have consequences." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and let myself feel it. All of it. The anger, yes, but also the grief. Because somewhere in the wreckage of the past 2 years, I'd lost something real. I'd lost the woman I'd loved, not to death or distance, but to the slow poison of doubt, administered daily by a son who loved his inheritance more than his mother's happiness. And that's the thing about betrayal. It's not the grand gestures that kill you. It's the small cuts, the 1,000 tiny moments of choosing to believe the worst instead of the best. It's watching someone you love look at you with suspicion instead of trust. It's the gradual realization that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you've already been convicted in a court you didn't even know existed. If you've ever loved someone who decided you were the enemy, you know that particular flavor of helplessness, that ache that settles in your chest and never quite leaves. But I wasn't helpless anymore. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building for 18 months. Evidence, documentation, the paper trail that would tell the real story. Let me tell you how I knew, how I prepared, how I built the trap that Marcus had just walked into with the confidence of someone who thought he was untouchable. It started 13 months ago, on a Tuesday morning in November. I came home early from a sales call that had been canceled, client emergency, reschedule next week, the usual corporate dance. I pulled into the driveway at 11:37 a.m., parked next to Diane's silver Lexus, and walked into a conversation I was never supposed to hear. They were in the kitchen. Marcus's voice carried through the house, sharp with frustration. "Mom, I'm telling you, he's playing you. Guys like him always have an angle. Why else would a 50-something divorcee with an okay job and a mediocre apartment suddenly be interested in a widow with a multi-million-dollar house? Marcus, that's not fair. Robert is a good man. He's been nothing but kind. Kind? Mom, wake up. He's isolated you from your friends. Have you talked to Patricia since the wedding? Or Susan? When's the last time you went to book club? A pause. A long one. I've been busy. We've been adjusting to married life. No, Mom. He's been adjusting you. Slowly. Carefully. Classic financial abuse tactics. And now he wants you to put his name on the house Dad bought? The house Dad worked for 40 years to pay off? You're really going to let some stranger just take it? He's not a stranger. He's my husband. He's been your husband for 6 months. Dad was your husband for 33 years. Don't dishonor his memory by handing his legacy over to someone who's probably already planning how to spend it. I stood in the hallway, frozen. I should have walked in, should have confronted them, should have defended myself. But I didn't, because I needed to hear this. Needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Diane's voice, when she spoke again, was smaller, uncertain. He did mention something about estate planning, about updating my will. He said it was standard for married couples. But it's not standard when one person has everything and the other person has nothing. Mom, listen to me. I've been doing some research. I've talked to a lawyer. There are things we can do to protect you. Protect Dad's legacy. But you need to trust me. Can you do that? Another pause. Okay, she whispered. Okay. What do I need to do? That was the moment I knew. The moment I understood that this wasn't going to get better. That Marcus wasn't going to back down. That Diane, in her grief and her guilt and her fear of disappointing her son, was going to choose him over me. I quietly let myself back out of the house, drove around the block, parked, and sat in my car for 20 minutes. Then I called Tom. I need to see you, I said, today, and I need you to bring your real estate specialist. What's going on? I'm about to play the longest game of chess I've ever played, and I need to make sure every move is legal, documented, and absolutely airtight. Here's what most people don't understand about revenge. They think it's hot, passionate, impulsive. They think it's about getting even in the moment, about striking back when you're wounded and angry. But the best revenge, the kind that actually works, that's cold, that's calculated, that's years in the making. Tom and I spent 3 hours in his office that day, mapping it out. The lawyer, he brought in Margaret Chen, a real estate attorney who'd handled some of the most complex property disputes in the state, listened to my situation, and then smiled. You're in a better position than you think, she said, but you need to be smart about this, and you need to be patient. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. First, I bought a house. Not just any house, a house on the same street as Diane's, 3 doors down, with an almost identical floor plan. It had been on the market for months, overpriced and under-maintained, the result of an estate sale gone wrong. I paid $890,000 cash, using money from investments I'd built over 30 years of careful saving. Then I renovated it, slowly, carefully, matching every detail to Diane's house. Same flooring, same fixtures, same paint colors. I told Diane it was an investment property, that I was flipping it, that it was going to be my retirement project. She never once asked to see it. While the renovation was happening, Margaret worked her magic on the title to Diane's house. Nothing illegal, nothing fraudulent, just creative. See, Diane had owned that house free and clear. No mortgage, just pure equity, worth about $2.4 million in the current market. But she'd also given me power of attorney 6 months into our marriage for emergency purposes, standard stuff for married couples. She'd signed it without reading it carefully, trusting that it was just procedural paperwork. What she didn't realize was that the power of attorney gave me the legal authority to act on her behalf in financial matters. So I borrowed against the house a lot. I took out a home equity line of credit for $1.2 million, then a second mortgage for another $800,000. Then I used the house as collateral for several business loans, totaling $400,000. All legal, all documented, all with her power of attorney authorizing the transactions. The money? I put it in a trust, in her name, for her benefit, untouchable by me in any divorce. Managed by an independent trustee with instructions to hold it until her death, at which point it would go to Marcus. I'd increased his inheritance by $2.4 million. But the house now had $2.4 million in liens against it. It was worth exactly nothing. Meanwhile, my house, the identical one, 3 doors down, remained in my name alone. Clear title, no debt. Worth about $1.1 million after renovations. Then I waited. I knew Marcus was going to make his move eventually. I knew he'd convince Diane that I was the enemy. I knew he'd find a way to push me out. I just needed to make sure that when he did, he'd go after the wrong house. The genius of it, and I don't say this to brag, but to explain, was that I didn't have to trick Marcus. He tricked himself. See, when you're convinced someone is a con artist, you start seeing cons everywhere. Every action becomes evidence of the grift. Every kindness is manipulation. Every suggestion is a scheme. So when I suggested that Diane and I should move into my house, the renovated one, and rent out her house for income, Marcus immediately assumed I was trying to claim her property. He's trying to confuse the ownership, he told Diane, according to the conversation I overheard 3 months later. Once you move into his house, once your mail goes there, once you establish residency, he'll argue that you abandoned your house, that it's marital property, that he's entitled to half. It's a classic bait and switch. Diane, bless her, actually defended me on that one. Robert said we could keep my house in my name. He even suggested putting it in a trust for you, Marcus. He's trying to protect your inheritance, not steal it. That's what he wants you to think. Mom, please, just don't move. Don't change anything. Keep everything exactly as it is. So we stayed in Diane's house, the one that was slowly becoming worthless as the liens and loans piled up against it. And my house sat empty, appreciating, waiting. 6 months ago, things accelerated. Marcus somehow obtained, and I still don't know how, though Tom has some theories involving bribed bank employees and illegal computer access copies of Diane's financial statements. He saw the loans, the mortgages, the lines of credit, and he exploded. I wasn't there for that conversation, but Diane told me about it later, her face pale, her hands shaking. He says you've been stealing from me, that you've mortgaged my house without my knowledge, that you've taken millions of dollars and hidden it somewhere. He showed me the papers, Robert. He showed me everything. Did you look at the signatures? I asked calmly. What? On the loan documents. Did you look at who signed them? She had. That's when she found the power of attorney documents, the ones she'd signed, the ones that authorized me to act on her behalf. You did this without telling me? Her voice broke. You put my house at risk without even asking? I was trying to protect you, to protect us. That money is in a trust, Diane. For you, for Marcus. I haven't touched a penny of it. That's not the point. You should have told me. You should have asked. And that was true. I should have. That was the one genuine mistake I'd made in all of this. The assumption that she'd trust me to act in her best interest, without explanation. But by then, Marcus had already poisoned the well. She heard my explanation through the filter of his suspicions, and every word I said sounded like a lie. That's when she asked me to move to the guest room. That's when I knew the endgame was coming. So I prepared. I documented everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every piece of evidence that would show exactly what I'd done and why. I also did something else. Something that made Tom deeply uncomfortable, but that Margaret insisted was necessary. I created a paper trail that made it look like the wrong house was the valuable one. Mail started going to Diane's house, addressed to me. Bills, statements, official-looking documents that suggested I'd been living there, permanently, for years. Meanwhile, mail for Diane started going to my house, the one she never visited, the one she'd forgotten about because I'd stopped mentioning the investment property months ago. I changed our joint accounts so they listed Diane's house as my primary residence and my house as hers. I filed our taxes showing Diane as a resident of my address. I was meticulous, systematic, building a legal maze that would confuse anyone who tried to unravel it quickly. And then I waited for Marcus to strike. He called me this afternoon at 3:47 p.m. "I've withdrawn all the money from your bank accounts," he'd said. He'd gotten into our joint accounts probably using power of attorney documents he'd forged using his mother's signature. Felony number 1. I also sold the house, he'd said. He'd listed Diane's house, forged her signature on the sale documents, and closed the deal. Felonies 2 through 6, depending on how Tom wanted to structure the charges. But here's the beautiful part, the part that made me laugh until tears streamed down my face. The house he sold was worth nothing. The buyer would discover, within days, that they'd purchased a property with more debt than value. They'd sue Marcus for fraud. They'd sue Diane for misrepresentation. They'd tie up the courts for years. And Marcus, who'd used forged documents to make the sale happen, would be looking at federal fraud charges. Meanwhile, my house, the real valuable one, the one that nobody knew about except Tom and Margaret and me, sat safe and clear, my name on the title, my equity intact. As for the money Marcus had withdrawn from our accounts, that was real. About $87,000 from checking and savings. I'd moved the rest, the real money, the investments, the retirement accounts, into new accounts months ago. Accounts in my name only. Accounts Marcus didn't know existed. He'd stolen $87,000 and thought he'd won. He had no idea he'd just destroyed his mother's financial security and his own freedom. I finished my whiskey and poured another. Tomorrow morning, Tom would file the motions. The fraud investigation would begin. Marcus would be arrested, probably by the end of the week. Diane would discover that the house she thought was hers was actually a financial disaster, and the money she thought was stolen was actually in a trust she couldn't touch. She'd also discover that I'd been protecting her all along, in the only way Marcus's suspicions would allow. And I'd walk away from this marriage with my head high, my finances intact, and the satisfaction of knowing that the person who'd tried to destroy me had destroyed himself instead. This is what quiet revenge looks like. Not destruction, not cruelty, just truth. Truth framed as justice. Truth that reveals itself in court documents and financial statements and the inevitable consequences of someone else's choices. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I kept in my private folder. Diane and me on our wedding day, smiling at the camera, her hand in mine, both of us believing in something that turned out to be as fragile as trust always is. I deleted it. Then I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a legal document this time, not evidence or strategy or planning, just this story, this record of how we got here. Because someone needs to know that the villain isn't always the villain. Sometimes he's just the man who refused to be the victim. I woke up at 6:12 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. Not ringing, buzzing. That insistent vibration that means someone is calling, repeatedly, hanging up, calling again. The kind of desperation that translates through technology. I knew who it was before I looked at the screen. Diane flashed across the display. Third call in 2 minutes. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to the silence of the hotel room. Outside, the city was beginning its Friday morning routine traffic building. People hurrying to jobs they tolerated, lives clicking forward in their predictable patterns. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Robert. Her voice was raw, scraped hollow by crying. Robert, please, we need to talk. About what? I kept my tone neutral. Not cold, not warm. Switzerland. If Switzerland could feel its heart breaking. Marcus called me this morning. Something's happened. The house sale. There's a problem with the title. The buyer's attorney is threatening to sue. They're saying the property has liens. Massive liens. They're saying Marcus committed fraud. Robert, they're saying I committed fraud. I sat up slowly, swung my legs over the edge of the bed. Through the hotel window, Seattle spread out below me, gray and green and oblivious. Did you commit fraud, Diane? What? No, of course not. But Marcus says you did something, that you put these loans against the house without telling me, that you ruined everything. I used the power of attorney you gave me to secure loans against your property. You signed those documents willingly. Everything was legal, but you didn't tell me. You didn't ask. The silence that followed was the sound of a marriage dying. We both heard it. We both knew what it meant. Robert, please. I need you to fix this. Whatever you did, whatever's happening, you need to make it right. Marcus is talking about criminal charges, about the FBI. He's panicking, and I don't know what to do, and you're my husband, and I need you to... To what? I cut her off, and my voice was harder now, sharp enough to draw blood. To save your son from the consequences of his own actions? To take the blame for his fraud? To disappear quietly so you and Marcus can pretend I was the villain all along? That's not... It is, though. That's exactly what this is. Marcus decided I was a con artist from day one. You chose to believe him. And now that he's the one who actually committed crimes, forged your signature, stole money, sold property under false pretenses, you want me to somehow make it all go away? He was trying to protect me. Her voice cracked. He was trying to protect me from you. From me. I laughed, and it tasted like ash. The man who loved you, who married you, who spent 2 years trying to build a life with you, while your son did everything in his power to destroy it. That's who you needed protection from. You manipulated me. You isolated me from my friends, my family. I invited your friends to our house every month. I planned dinners with your sister. I encouraged you to join that book club Patricia kept asking you about. You stopped seeing them because Marcus convinced you that spending time with them meant you were betraying him, betraying your late husband's memory. You chose isolation, Diane. I just happened to be there when you did. She was crying now, full sobs, ugly and real. And I felt nothing. That's the thing about grief, about betrayal. Eventually, you run out. Eventually, the well goes dry, and you're left standing in the desert of what used to be your heart, and all you can do is observe the landscape of your own emptiness. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings, I said quietly. You'll find that I've been more than fair in my proposals. You'll also find that the money from those loans you're so worried about, it's in a trust. For you, all $2.4 million of it. I never touched a penny. But you'll need to work with the trustee to access it, and you'll need to deal with the legal mess Marcus created. That's not my problem anymore. Robert, I hung up. Then I turned off my phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and went to take a shower. Tom called the hotel room at 8:30 a.m. sharp. We've filed the emergency motions, he said. The DA's office is very interested. Apparently, Marcus isn't as clever as he thinks he is. He left a trail a mile wide. Forged signatures on multiple documents, wire transfers that can be traced directly to his accounts, emails to the title company, where he explicitly misrepresented his authority to sell the property. They're building a case that could put him away for 5 to 10 years. I closed my eyes. And Diane? She's not off the hook entirely. She gave him power of attorney. We found those documents, and they're real. But she's more victim than perpetrator. If she cooperates, if she testifies about how Marcus manipulated her into signing things, she'll probably avoid criminal charges. Civil liability, though? That's going to be messy. The buyer? Furious. Their attorney has already filed suit against both Marcus and Diane for fraudulent misrepresentation. They're seeking full restitution, plus damages. This is going to cost your wife, your soon-to-be ex-wife, everything she has left, except the trust. Except the trust, which, ironically, means that Marcus's attempt to steal his mother's wealth has actually protected it. The trust is untouchable by creditors. She'll lose the house, lose any remaining equity, probably lose a civil judgment. But that $2.4 million you secured, that's safe. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, something. Instead, I just felt tired. Tom, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Set up a meeting with Diane's attorney. Explain the trust situation. Make sure they understand that she has resources, that she's not destitute. And then, draw up the divorce papers with the most generous terms possible. She keeps the trust, I keep my house. We split the remaining assets 60-40 inches her favor. No alimony, no further claims from either side. Clean break. Silence on the other end. Robert, you know I love you like a brother, but I have to ask, are you insane? This woman just tried to let her son rob you blind. You don't owe her generosity. I know, but I don't want to become what Marcus thought I was. I don't want to win by destroying her. I just want to walk away knowing I did the right thing, even when no one was watching. More silence. Then, you're a better man than I am. All right, I'll set it up. But Robert, after this is done, take some time. Get your head straight. Maybe see someone. Process this. Because what you're going through, this kind of betrayal, it leaves scars. And scars have a way of shaping how we approach the next thing. I don't want to see you become cynical. Too late for that, Tom. No, it's not. Trust me on this. It's never too late. Let me tell you about the house I bought. The identical one. The investment property that became my salvation. It's important, this detail, because it's not just about the money or the scheme or the legal maneuvering. It's about what that house represented. I found it 6 weeks after I overheard Marcus poisoning Diane against me. 6 weeks of watching my wife pull away, watching her question everything, watching the love we'd built crumble under the weight of her son's suspicions. I was driving home from work, taking the long route, because I was dreading another evening of careful conversation and loaded silences when I saw the for sale sign. Same street, 3 doors down, almost identical architecture. I pulled over, sat in my car, stared at it, and something clicked. If you've ever had a moment of perfect clarity, not a good moment, necessarily, but a true one, you know what I'm talking about. That instant when you see the whole board, when the pieces arrange themselves and you understand exactly what move you need to make. I called the listing agent right there from my car. The house had been on the market for 7 months, estate sale. The old owner's children were fighting over the proceeds, couldn't agree on a price, had let the property deteriorate. It needed work. A lot of work, but it was perfect. I made an offer that afternoon. Cash, no inspection contingency, close in 3 weeks. The agent nearly wept with relief. The renovation took 4 months. I hired the same contractors who'd worked on Diane's house years ago, used the same suppliers, matched every detail obsessively: the oak flooring with its particular stain, the subway tile in the kitchen, the brushed nickel fixtures, even the paint colors. Benjamin Moore, Revere pewter in the living room, pale oak in the bedrooms, Swiss coffee for the trim. Diane knew about it, vaguely. I told her I was flipping a property, that it was my retirement project, that I'd always wanted to try my hand at real estate investment. She nodded absently, distracted by whatever Marcus had said to her that day, and never asked to see it. That's how far we'd drifted. That's how completely Marcus had succeeded in making her suspicious of everything I did. I could have been building a shrine to her dead husband in that house, and she wouldn't have noticed. I spent my weekends there, sometimes sleeping on an air mattress after long days of work, painting and installing and measuring and obsessing over every detail. It became my sanctuary, my escape, the place where I wasn't the villain in someone else's narrative, but just a man with a paintbrush, trying to build something solid. Margaret visited once, 3 months into the renovation, walked through every room, checked every corner, nodded approvingly. "It's identical," she said. "Down to the crown molding. You've done good work. Think it'll hold up in court?" "If it comes to that, yes. You own this property outright. Clear title. Paid for it with your own money before the marriage. No reasonable judge would award any of this to Diane in a divorce. And if Marcus tries to claim it's marital property because of the similarities, well, the documentation tells a different story." She showed me what she meant. The paper trail we'd been building, tax records showing my property as my primary residence, utility bills in my name, mail forwarded to this address. A careful accumulation of evidence that, on paper, made it look like I lived here and Diane lived in her house. It's a shell game, Margaret explained, and it's completely legal as long as all the documentation is accurate. You have been spending significant time here. You do receive mail here. The fact that Diane doesn't know about it doesn't make it fraudulent. It just makes it strategic. Strategic? That's a nice word for it. The truth is, I was building a lifeboat because I knew the ship was sinking. I knew Marcus wouldn't stop until he'd driven me out. And I needed to make sure that when I went overboard, I had something to cling to. I just didn't expect Marcus to try to sink his mother along with me. The day I finished the renovation, I took a photo. Standing in the living room, sunlight streaming through windows I'd personally installed, falling across floors I'd refinished with my own hands. The house was empty, still no furniture, no personal touches, but it was mine. Completely, undeniably mine. I sent the photo to my daughters. "New project finished," I texted. "What do you think?" Sarah, my oldest, called immediately. "Dad, that's gorgeous. Did you really do all that yourself?" "Most of it. Hired out the electrical and plumbing. But yeah, it's been my therapy project." A pause. Then, carefully. "How are things with Diane?" Sarah had never liked Marcus. She'd been polite at the wedding, friendly during holiday visits, but I'd seen the way she watched him, the way she assessed and dismissed him within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. "Not great," I admitted. "Because of her son? How did you know?" "Dad, come on. He's one of those guys. The kind who thinks he's protecting his mom but is really just protecting his inheritance. Jessica and I talked about it. We saw it coming." Jessica, my younger daughter, had been more direct. She'd pulled me aside at the wedding reception, wine loose and honest, and said, "That Marcus kid is a dick. Just so you know, watch your back." I should have listened. "It's gotten complicated," I told Sarah, "but I'm handling it. Do you need anything? Money? A place to stay? We could—" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Really. I've been preparing for this." Another pause. Longer this time. "The house in the photo," she said slowly. "That's not Diane's house, is it?" "No, it's mine. I bought it a year ago. Does Diane know?" "I won't sell. She knows I bought an investment property. She doesn't know where, or that it's identical to hers, or that I've been building a paper trail showing it as my primary residence." "Dad, that's kind of brilliant. And kind of terrifying. Should I be worried that my father has become a criminal mastermind?" I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in weeks. Everything I've done is completely legal. I've just been careful. Is she going to be okay? Diane, I mean, when this all comes out? And that was why I loved my daughters. Even after everything, the divorce from their mother, the disruption to their lives, the years of custody schedules and divided holidays, they'd grown into people who cared about others, who asked the hard questions. "I'm making sure she will be," I said. "She doesn't deserve what Marcus is doing. She's just caught in the middle." "You really love her, don't you? Even now?" "Yeah, I do. That's the worst part." Sitting in the hotel room on Friday morning, Tom's latest update delivered and absorbed, I thought about that conversation with Sarah, about the house I'd built, about the life I'd been preparing to live without Diane, even while still living with her, about the moment you realize you're grieving someone who's still alive. My phone, which I'd turned back on, buzzed with a text. "Marcus, we need to talk. You've destroyed my mother's life. I hope you're proud of yourself." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed a response. "I protected your mother's life. You destroyed your own. There's a difference." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. His response came in seconds. "Fuck you. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Every friend you have, every client, everyone. I'm going to ruin you the way you've ruined us." I typed back, "Do what you need to do, Marcus. But before you do, you might want to talk to a criminal defense attorney. The DA's office should be contacting you sometime today." Then I blocked his number. Because here's the thing about revenge. The real kind. The kind that actually works. It's not about the last word. It's not about winning the argument or making the other person hurt. It's about being able to walk away, knowing that the truth will reveal itself, with or without your participation. The truth was that Marcus had committed multiple felonies while trying to save his mother from a threat that didn't exist. The truth was that Diane had chosen to believe the worst about me rather than trust what we'd built together. The truth was that I'd loved someone who'd decided I was the enemy, and I'd protected her anyway. Because that's what love actually looks like when it's stripped of romance and reduced to its essential nature. Love is wanting someone to be okay, even when they don't want you anymore. Love is building a trust fund for a woman who thinks you're stealing from her. Love is walking away before you become the person they accused you of being. I showered, dressed, and checked out of the hotel at 10 a.m. Then I drove to my house. The real one. The one nobody knew about except the people who needed to know. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and breathed in the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings. This was home now, not because it looked like the place I'd lived with Diane, but because it was mine, built with my own hands, paid for with my own money, untouchable by anyone else's lies or suspicions or betrayals. I walked through each room slowly, remembering the work, the planning, the long nights of measuring and cutting and building. Then I went to the master bedroom, stood at the window that overlooked the street, and watched the world continue its Friday routine. Somewhere across town, Marcus was probably getting a call from a federal agent. Somewhere in the house I'd just left behind, Diane was probably crying, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Somewhere in a law office, Tom was probably filing papers that would end my second marriage and close this chapter of my life. And I was here, standing in an empty house that looked exactly like the one I'd lost but was actually the one I'd saved. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the sadness. But beneath both, beneath the exhaustion and the grief and the hollow victory, there was something else. Relief. I'd survived. I'd protected myself. I'd done it without becoming what they accused me of being. That had to count for something. The call from Tom came at 2:47 p.m., 3 hours after I'd moved the first piece of furniture into my house, a leather chair I'd been storing at my office, the one comfort item I'd allowed myself to keep separate from the life I'd shared with Diane. Marcus has been arrested, Tom said, his voice carrying that particular flatness lawyers use when delivering news that's both expected and still somehow shocking. FBI picked him up at his office about an hour ago. Wire fraud, real estate fraud, identity theft, forgery. They're holding him pending arraignment. Bail hearing is scheduled for Monday morning. I sat down in the chair, felt the leather creak under my weight. Through the window, I could see the street, my street now quiet and suburban and utterly ordinary. How did Diane take it? She's at the federal building now. They brought her in for questioning, not as a suspect, at least not yet, but as a witness. Margaret's recommendation for a defense attorney is meeting her there. From what I understand, she's not handling it well. And the buyer? Their lawsuit is moving forward. They're going after the sale proceeds, which Marcus foolishly deposited into his personal account. They'll get a judgment, they'll seize everything he has, and he'll still owe them the difference. Plus, whatever criminal restitution the court orders. The kid's looking at financial ruin even before we factor in the prison time. I closed my eyes, tried to feel something other than this hollow ache. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. Am I a good person? The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful, measured. The kind of pause that means someone is actually considering the question instead of rushing to reassure you. You're a person who was put in an impossible situation, Tom finally said. You loved someone whose child decided you were a threat. You tried to build trust with people who'd already decided you were guilty, and when they moved to destroy you, you protected yourself. That doesn't make you bad, Robert. It makes you human. I built an elaborate trap and let Marcus walk into it. You built a legal safety net, and Marcus chose to commit multiple felonies while trying to tear it down. There's a difference. You didn't force him to forge documents. You didn't force him to steal money or sell property he didn't own. He made those choices. Bad choices. Criminal choices. And now he's facing the consequences. But I knew he would. I counted on it. You counted on him being exactly who he showed himself to be. That's not manipulation. That's just paying attention. Maybe. Or maybe I was exactly what Marcus had always accused me of, being just more competent at it than he'd imagined. Let me tell you about Marcus's wedding. The one that was supposed to happen tomorrow. The one he'd called me about yesterday. So smug and certain that he'd finally won. I knew about it before he called. Had known for 3 weeks, actually, ever since I'd seen the invitation on Diane's dresser while she was in the shower. Ivory cardstock, elegant script, a venue in wine country that probably cost more than most people's cars. Marcus Donovan and Becca Chen request the honor of your presence. I'd stood there holding that invitation, feeling the weight of expensive paper stock in my hands, and I'd known that this was the deadline Marcus had set for himself. Known that he wanted to start his married life free from the burden of his mother's mistake husband. Known that whatever he was planning, whatever move he was going to make, it would come before that wedding. So I'd prepared. I'd made sure every legal defense was in place. Made sure Tom had all the documentation ready to file at a moment's notice. Made sure the paper trail was so clear, so obvious, that any investigation would lead straight back to Marcus's forged signatures and fraudulent claims. And then I'd waited. The invitation was still there, probably. Still sitting on Diane's dresser, a reminder of a celebration that would never happen. Because Marcus wouldn't be getting married tomorrow. He'd be sitting in a jail cell, trying to explain to a federal judge why he should be released on bail, despite the overwhelming evidence of fraud and flight risk. And Becca, poor Becca, who'd probably thought she was marrying into money and stability, would be left to decide whether to stand by a man facing federal prison or cut her losses and run. I wondered if Marcus had told her what he'd done. If he'd bragged about it, shown her the bank statements, explained how he'd saved his mother from her predatory husband. I wondered if she was still planning to marry him. Then I realized I didn't actually care. That's what exhaustion does. It strips away even your capacity for curiosity about other people's pain. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something instinct, maybe, or just the same compulsive need to know that had gotten me into this mess, made me accept the call. Mr. Hartley? A woman's voice. Young, professional, trying very hard to sound calm. Speaking. This is Becca Chen. I'm Marcus's fiancée. We haven't met, but I need to talk to you. I sat up straighter. How did you get this number? From Diane. She's Mr. Hartley. She's falling apart, and Marcus won't tell me what's happening. He just keeps saying, you did this, you set him up, you destroyed everything. But the FBI agents, they showed me the evidence, the forged signatures, the fraudulent sale documents, and I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. What do you want from me? Becca, the truth, please. I'm supposed to marry this man tomorrow, and I don't even know who he is anymore. Did you really manipulate Diane? Did you really steal from her like Marcus says? I walked to the window, looked out at the street where nothing was happening, where life continued in its mundane patterns, where people walked dogs and checked mailboxes and had no idea that worlds were collapsing 3 doors down. I married a woman I loved, I said carefully. Her son decided I was a con artist from day one. He spent 2 years poisoning her against me, convincing her I was manipulating her, isolating her from support systems, while claiming I was the one doing the isolating. And when he finally made his move to save her, he committed multiple felonies. That's the truth. Whether you believe it is up to you. But the loans against her house were legal, documented, placed into a trust for Diane's benefit. I never touched that money. Every penny is accounted for, held by an independent trustee, designated for Diane, and eventually for Marcus. I was protecting her assets, not stealing them. The fact that Marcus couldn't see the difference says more about him than it does about me. Silence, long and heavy. He really believed it, she finally said, her voice small. He really believed you were the villain. I know. And now oh God, we're supposed to get married tomorrow. Everyone's coming. My parents flew in from Taiwan, his friends from business school. We've paid for everything, and he's in jail. and I don't know if I even know him." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "You don't deserve to be caught up in this." "Neither did Diane," Becca said quietly. "Did she?" "No, she didn't." Another pause. Then, "Are you going to press charges? I mean, beyond what the FBI is doing. Are you going to sue him? Sue her?"
"I'm not suing anyone. The buyer of the house is suing them both, and that's their right. Marcus and Diane defrauded them. But from me, Diane will get fair terms in the divorce."
Marcus will face whatever the legal system decides he deserves. I'm not interested in revenge beyond that. This whole thing is revenge, though, isn't it? You knew Marcus would try something. You prepared for it. You built this trap. I built a safety net. Marcus chose to attack it with a knife. The fact that the knife broke and cut him instead, that's not my fault. But you knew it would. I knew he was who he was. Yes. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. His mom is right. You are scary. Not because you're cruel, but because you're so methodical, so patient. You played a 2-year game and you never once lost your temper. I lost my temper plenty of times, I said. I just lost it in private, in my car, in my office, in the house nobody knew I owned. You don't survive this kind of situation by being impulsive. Are you going to be okay after all this? The question surprised me. Surprised me enough that I actually thought about it. I don't know, I admitted. Ask me in a year. For what it's worth, I believe you. About the manipulation. About Marcus. I've seen how he operates. How he's always the hero of his own story. Always the one saving people from themselves. I just thought it was confidence, leadership. Now I'm wondering if it's something else. It's fear? I said. He's terrified of losing control, of losing his place in his mother's life, of not being the most important person in her world. And that fear made him dangerous. Is that why you protected yourself so carefully? Because you knew fear makes people do terrible things? That's exactly why. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more resolved. I'm calling off the wedding. I can't marry someone who did this, who lied to me about this, who's going to prison for this. That's probably wise. He's going to blame you for that, too. He can add it to the list. A bitter laugh. Good luck, Mr. Hartley. I hope you find someone who deserves you, someone whose family isn't a nightmare. Good luck to you too, Becca. You deserve better than this. She hung up. I sat in the leather chair and watched the afternoon light change, shadows lengthening across my empty house, and thought about deserving things. Did Diane deserve what was happening to her? Being questioned by the FBI? Facing lawsuits? Discovering that the son she defended had destroyed her financial security in the name of protecting it? Did Marcus deserve prison time for crimes committed out of misguided love for his mother? Did I deserve to be alone in this house I'd built as a sanctuary from a marriage that was supposed to be my second chance? Deserving, I decided, was the wrong framework. Life doesn't operate on a system of karmic justice where good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. Life is just a series of choices and consequences. And sometimes the consequences are proportional, and sometimes they're not, and deserving has nothing to do with any of it. Marcus had made choices. I had made choices. Diane had made choices. Now we were all living with the consequences. That evening, I drove to a storage unit across town, Unit 247, at Public Storage, on Miller Avenue to be exact. The one Marcus had mentioned when he called yesterday. So proud of himself for putting my belongings somewhere I'd have to claim them, so certain he'd won. The manager at the front desk was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain and a kind face that had probably seen every variety of human drama play out in her storage units. Unit 247, I said. I believe my belongings were placed there recently? She typed on her computer, frowned. Yes. Rental was paid for 3 months by a Marcus Donovan, but the unit is listed under Diane Hartley's name as the authorized person. Are you authorized? I'm Robert Hartley, Diane's husband. Those are my belongings. I'll need to see ID. I showed her my driver's license. She studied it. typed more, frowned harder. The problem is, Mr. Hartley, your name isn't on the authorization list. Only Diane Hartley and Marcus Donovan are authorized to access this unit. Of course Marcus would have thought of that. One more small cruelty. One more way to inconvenience me. To make me dependent on Diane's goodwill to retrieve my own possessions. Can you call Diane Hartley and get authorization? I can try. She picked up the phone, dialed, waited. Hi, Mrs. Hartley? This is Sandra from Public Storage on Miller. I have your husband here asking to access Unit 247. Can you authorize? Oh, I see. Yes, I understand. Thank you. She hung up, looked at me with something that might have been pity. She says she needs to think about it, that there are some personal items in there she needs to go through first. She'll call me back. I nodded slowly. Can I ask what's actually in the unit? Sandra hesitated, then apparently decided that information wasn't confidential. Some clothes, boxes of books and papers, a desk, a few pieces of furniture. Honestly, it looks like someone just packed up a bedroom and an office very quickly. Nothing valuable. That's all my possessions? According to the manifest, Marcus Donovan provided. Yes. 2 years of living with Diane, 2 years of accumulating a shared life. And what I had to show for it was some clothes, some books, and furniture that fit in a 10x10 storage unit. The rest, the photos, the gifts, the small domestic artifacts that mark a marriage probably thrown away or kept by Diane or considered too meaningless to bother with. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was also perfectly in character for Marcus's brand of petty vindictiveness. Tell you what, Sandra said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. I can't let you in the unit. But if you happen to rent another unit, and if you happen to give me a list of items you believe are yours, and if Mrs. Hartley were to authorize the transfer of those specific items to your new unit, well, that would be following procedure, wouldn't it? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the wedding ring on her finger, the photos on her desk of grandchildren, the way her eyes held that particular kindness that comes from having survived your own share of life's catastrophes. You've seen this before, I said. Haven't you? The aftermath. Honey, I've managed this place for 30 years. I've seen every kind of aftermath there is. Divorces, evictions, deaths, families fighting over junk that nobody actually wants. And I've learned to spot the difference between people who are cruel and people who are just in pain. You strike me as the latter. I might be both. Maybe. But at least you're honest about it. Rent a unit? I rented Unit 309. Gave Sandra a detailed list of what I believed Marcus had taken from the house. My clothes, my books, my desk from the home office, my grandmother's lamp, the signed first edition of Lonesome Dove my father had given me. I'll work on Mrs. Hartley, Sandra promised. And between you and me, if she doesn't authorize the transfer in the next few days, items have been known to get moved by accident. Inventory errors happen. Just saying. I smiled. Actually smiled. Thank you, Sandra. We've all been where you are, honey. One way or another, might as well help each other out. I stopped for dinner on the way home, a Greek place I'd never been to. Because all my usual restaurants held memories of Diane, and I didn't want to risk running into people who'd ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. The food was good. Better than it had any right to be for a strip mall restaurant with plastic tables and fluorescent lighting. I ate slowly, watching families and couples and solo diners, all of us engaged in the simple ritual of consuming food, this universal human need that continues regardless of whether your world is falling apart. A text came through while I was paying the bill. Just got word from the federal prosecutor's office. They're offering Marcus a plea deal. 7 years if he pleads guilty to the fraud charges and makes full restitution. Otherwise, they're going to trial and pushing for 12. His attorney is advising him to take it. I stared at the message. 7 years. Marcus was 28. He'd be 35 when he got out. His 20s and most of his 30s, gone. His career, destroyed. His wedding, canceled. His relationship with his mother, probably irreparably damaged. All because he'd been so certain I was the villain that he'd become one himself trying to stop me. I typed back, "What does he say?" "He's still insisting you're the one who should be in jail, that you manipulated everything, that you're the real criminal. The prosecutor isn't buying it. Neither is his attorney, from what I hear. And Diane? She's retained counsel. Smart move. She's going to need it for the civil suits. But word is, she's also starting to realize what actually happened, what Marcus did. Margaret spoke with her attorney this afternoon. Apparently Diane spent an hour going through the trust documents, the loan agreements, all the evidence that you were protecting her rather than stealing from her. She's processing. Is she going to be okay? Eventually, she's got the trust. She'll have to settle with the buyer, probably for a substantial amount, but she won't be destitute. Emotionally, that's going to take longer. She's facing the reality that her son destroyed her life while claiming to save it, and that her husband spent 2 years preparing to survive an attack he knew was coming. That's a lot to process. I'm Marge. Keep me updated. And Tom, make sure the divorce terms are generous. I don't want her suffering more than she already is. You're a good man, Robert, even if you don't believe it. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel like the hero of this story instead of just the survivor. But all I felt was tired. Bone deep, soul exhausted, tired. I drove home to my house, my sanctuary, my carefully constructed escape, and walked through empty rooms that echoed with potential but felt hollow with absence. This was victory. This was justice. This was the quiet revenge that I'd planned so carefully, executed so precisely. It felt like ash in my mouth. Later that night, lying on an air mattress, in what would eventually be my bedroom, I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through old photos, the ones I hadn't deleted yet. Diane and me at the vineyard wedding. Diane laughing at something I'd said over dinner. Diane asleep on the couch, book open on her chest. Small moments of happiness that felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I should delete them, should clear out every reminder, start fresh, embrace this new chapter. Instead, I just looked at them, let myself remember what it felt like to believe in something before it crumbled. Then I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling of my empty house and waited for sleep that wouldn't come. Tomorrow, Marcus would probably take the plea deal. Diane would continue unraveling. Becca would be calling vendors and canceling a wedding that cost more than most people make in a year. And I would start the slow work of figuring out how to be a person again, instead of just a strategy. If you've ever won a battle but lost everything that made winning worthwhile, you know what that feels like. It feels like this, like an empty house, and old photos, and the hollow echo of justified revenge. Saturday morning arrived with rain. Not the gentle Seattle mist that passes for weather here, but real rain, heavy and deliberate. The kind that drums against windows and turns streets into rivers and makes you feel like the sky is mourning something it can't quite name. I woke up on the air mattress at 6:23 a.m., my back protesting the temporary sleeping arrangement, my phone already showing 3 missed calls, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, 1 from my daughter Sarah. I called her back first. "Dad." Her voice was tight with worry. "I just saw the news. The Seattle Times is running a story about Marcus's arrest. They're calling it local tech consultant charged in multi-million-dollar real estate fraud. Your name isn't in it." "But, Dad, what happened?" I sat up slowly, every muscle complaining. Through the bedroom window, I could see rain sliding down glass, distorting the world beyond. It's complicated. That's what you always say when something is actually very simple but very painful. Talk to me. So I did. I told her everything. The whole 2-year story, condensed into 20 minutes of careful explanation. The suspicions, the manipulation, the trap I'd built. Marcus's catastrophic mistake. The arrest, the impending divorce. She listened without interrupting, which is how I knew it was bad. Sarah only goes quiet when she's processing something that requires her full analytical attention. When I finished, the silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sarah, I'm here. Dad, this is insane. This is like something out of a legal thriller. You planned all this? For 2 years? I prepared for all this. Marcus made his own choices. But you knew he would. You counted on him being exactly this stupid and vindictive. Yes, that's... She paused. Actually, kind of terrifying. In an impressive way, but terrifying. Your sister said something similar. Does Jessica know? Not yet. I was going to call her today. Don't. Let me. She's going to have opinions. Strong ones. And you probably don't need to hear them all at once. A pause. Dad, are you okay? And I don't mean legally or financially. I mean actually okay. I looked around the empty room, at the air mattress and the single lamp and the boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, at the rain-streaked window and the life I was trying to build from the ruins of the one I'd lost. No, I said honestly, but I will be, eventually. Do you still love her, Diane? The question hit harder than it should have. Maybe because I'd been avoiding asking it myself. I love who I thought she was. Who she was before Marcus convinced her I was the enemy. Does that count? I don't know. Does it? I don't know either. Sarah sighed. Listen, I'm coming up there. Jessica too, if I can drag her away from work. You shouldn't be alone right now. Sarah, I'm fine. Dad, stop. You're not fine. You're in an empty house with an air mattress dealing with the aftermath of outsmarting a criminal while your marriage implodes. That's the literal opposite of fine. We're coming. This weekend. I'm booking flights now. Don't argue. I found myself smiling despite everything. When did you become the parent in this relationship? About 5 minutes after Mom left. Someone had to keep you from becoming a hermit who lives on takeout and regret. I'm not a hermit. Went to 19.2. I'm not a hermit. I'm not a hermit. Went to 19.2. 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 You're sitting alone in an empty house on a Saturday morning. That's like hermit adjacent. Fair point. We'll be there by dinner. Don't eat. I'm making you a real meal. And Dad? And we'll meal. And Dad? And we'll be there by dinner? Yeah? I'm proud of you. For protecting yourself. For not letting them destroy you. Even if the whole thing is completely insane. After we hung up, I sat on the air mattress and felt something loosen in my chest. Something I hadn't realized was wound tight until it released. My daughters were coming. I wasn't as alone as I felt. The other calls were from reporters. I didn't answer them, didn't call back, deleted the voicemails without listening. Tom had warned me this might happen. If the story gets picked up, if it becomes salacious enough, the media will try to find you. Don't talk to them. Don't comment. Don't even confirm your name. Let the legal process play out. Instead, I spent the morning doing what I should have done months ago. Making this house feel like a home. I drove to a furniture store in Bellevue, the kind with showrooms that smell like new carpet and false domesticity. Bought a bed, a real one, king-sized, with a headboard and everything. Bought a couch, a coffee table, bar stools for the kitchen island, a dining table that could seat 6, even though I'd probably eat alone for the foreseeable future. The salesman, a guy named Derek with 2 white teeth and a practiced smile, asked if I was furnishing a new place. Starting over, I said. Divorce? Is it that obvious? I've been doing this for 12 years. You develop a radar. The starting over guys always have this look, like they're building something on purpose instead of just buying things. You want my advice? Sure. Get stuff you actually like, not stuff you think you should have, not stuff that's practical or sensible, stuff that makes you happy when you look at it, because you're going to be looking at it a lot, and it might as well bring you joy. So I did. I bought the ridiculously comfortable leather couch instead of the sensible fabric one. I bought the reclaimed wood dining table that cost twice what it should because it had character and history. I bought lamps that look like art installations and a coffee table made from a repurposed factory cart and bar stools that probably violated several principles of ergonomic design but looked cool as hell. Derek approved. Now you're getting it. Now you're building a life instead of just filling space. They deliver everything on Monday. In the meantime, I had an empty house and a weekend to fill, and the slow, grinding awareness that I'd won the battle but had no idea how to live with the victory. Let me tell you about the moment I realized Diane had stopped believing in us. It was 3 months ago, early September. We were having dinner at a Thai place downtown, one of our regular spots, the kind of meal that should have been comfortable and familiar. She was pushing pad thai around her plate, not eating, and I knew something was coming. You learn to read the silence. After enough years of marriage, the first one taught me that, at least. "Robert," she finally said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay, the loans against the house, the ones Marcus showed me, why didn't you tell me about them?" We'd been over this multiple times, but I answered again, patient, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I used the power of attorney you gave me to secure loans against the property. The money is in a trust, Diane. For you. For Marcus. Eventually. I was trying to protect our assets. Diversify. Make sure you'd be taken care of if something happened to me. But you didn't ask me first." I didn't think I needed to. We're married. The power of attorney specifically authorizes me to make financial decisions on your behalf. I thought I was helping. She set down her fork, looked at me with those gray-green eyes that used to look at me with love but now just looked tired. "Marcus says, you're gaslighting me. That making decisions for my own good without consulting me is a classic control tactic." Something cold settled in my stomach. "And what do you think?" "I think." She paused, looked away. "I think I don't know anymore. I think I want to believe you, but everything Marcus says makes sense. And I don't know who to trust. You're my wife. You should trust me. You're asking me to choose between my husband and my son." "No, Marcus is asking you to do that. I'm asking you to look at the actual evidence, to see what I've actually done versus what he's convinced you I've done. There's a difference." But she couldn't see it. Or wouldn't. The poison had already taken root. We finished dinner in silence. Drove home separately because she'd met me there from a lunch with Marcus. I watched her taillights disappear into Seattle traffic and knew, with absolute certainty, that we were ending. Not that day, not that week, but soon. Marcus had won the war for his mother's trust. The marriage was just waiting for the official paperwork. That night, I'd gone to my house, the empty one, the safe one, and I'd allowed myself to rage. I'd thrown things, shouted at walls, punched a door frame hard enough to bruise my knuckles. Then I'd called Tom. "He's going to make his move soon," I told him. "We need to be ready." "How do you know?" "Because he's convinced her I'm the enemy." And once you've convinced someone of that, once you've isolated them from their own judgment, the next step is to rescue them. He's going to do something dramatic, something that proves he was right all along. And we need to make sure that when he does, we're prepared. Tom had sighed. "You know, this is all very Game of Thrones, right? The scheming, the long game, the preparation for an attack you know is coming, but can't prevent. Except in Game of Thrones, everybody dies." "Not everybody. Some people get to sail off into the sunset." "Which people?" "The smart ones. The ones who plan ahead." The rain continued all afternoon. I unpacked boxes, hung clothes in the master bedroom closet, set up my desk in what would be the home office, found the signed first edition of Lonesome Dove, and placed it on a shelf with the kind of reverence it deserved. My father had given me that book on my 30th birthday. "You're the right age now," he'd said. "Old enough to appreciate what McMurtry understood about men and friendship and the myths we tell ourselves about who we are." I'd read it 3 times since then, each time finding something different. Each time understanding a little more about the distance between the people we want to be and the people we actually are. I wondered what my father would think of all this. He died 8 years ago, right after my first divorce, so he'd never met Diane. Never saw me try to build something new from the ruins of something old. But I thought he'd understand. He'd been a practical man, a chess player, someone who thought 3 moves ahead and didn't apologize for being prepared. "Life comes at you fast," he used to say. "The people who survive are the ones who see it coming." I'd seen Marcus coming from the first handshake. I just hadn't expected the collision to be this catastrophic. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Diane. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Robert. Her voice was raw, destroyed. Can we talk, please? About what? About everything. About what Marcus did. About what you did. About all of it. I've been with lawyers all morning, and I'm trying to understand, and I need to hear it from you. The whole truth. I looked around my empty house, at the rain outside, at the life I was building that she'd never be part of. Where are you? At the house. The old house. Marcus's lawyer got him bail this morning. He's at my place now, packing. The court ordered him to stay with me until trial. Some kind of house arrest situation. But he won't talk to me. He just keeps saying, "You did this. You destroyed everything. And I'm trying to understand how we got here." Did you tell him where I am? No. He doesn't know about your other house. I didn't even know about it until the FBI agent mentioned it yesterday. Robert, you bought an identical house, 3 doors down, and you never told me? I told you I bought an investment property. You didn't tell me it was a replica of my home. Our home, I corrected quietly. It was our home. Until Marcus convinced you it wasn't. Silence. Long and painful. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. I'm so sorry. I believed him. I chose to believe him over you. And now I'm looking at the evidence and I see what you were actually doing, and I realize you were trying to protect me while I was accusing you of destroying me, and I don't know how to live with that. You live with it the same way I'm living. With the fact that the woman I loved decided I was the enemy. One day at a time. One breath at a time. Until eventually, it hurts a little less. Does it hurt less? I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. Becca said the same thing, that you told her to ask in a year. You talked to Becca? She came by this morning, before Marcus made bail. She wanted to see if I was okay. Can you imagine? The girl whose wedding my son destroyed came to check on me. She's a better person than any of us deserve. She is. She said you were kind to her, that you told her the truth even when you didn't have to. She asked. I answered. Robert, can I see you? Can we talk in person? I know I don't deserve it. I know I gave up the right to ask things from you, but I need to see your face when you tell me what happened. I need to know if there's any chance, any possibility that we can find our way back from this. Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to protect myself, to maintain the distance that had kept me sane through the worst of this. But I heard something in her voice, something broken and real and stripped of all the defensiveness that Marcus had built around her. I'll come by tomorrow, I said, after my daughters leave. They're flying in tonight. Sarah and Jessica are coming? Yeah. That's good. You shouldn't be alone. A pause. They never liked Marcus, did they? No. They saw what I couldn't see. They saw what you didn't want to see. There's a difference. Is there? I don't know anymore, Diane. I don't know anything anymore except that I'm tired and I'm sad and I want this all to be over. Me too, she whispered. Me too. My daughters arrived at 6:47 p.m. Sarah carrying takeout bags from my favorite Vietnamese place and Jessica carrying what appeared to be an entire liquor store. We brought pho and whiskey, Jessica announced, looking around the empty house with frank assessment. And also wine, vodka, and something called mezcal that the guy at the store said would either cure what ails you or make you forget you were ever ailed. Sarah set the food on the kitchen counter, the one surface that existed in the otherwise unfurnished space. Dad, you really went full divorced guy with this place, didn't you? It's like a movie set for someone's rock bottom. I just bought furniture today. It'll be delivered Monday. Thank God. I was worried we'd be eating on the floor. We did eat on the floor, sitting cross-legged on the hardwood, bowls of pho steaming between us, the smell of star anise and basil and new beginnings filling the empty space. Jessica, who'd inherited her mother's directness and my stubbornness, got straight to it. So, You're basically a criminal mastermind who legally destroyed your stepson's life in retaliation for his attempt to illegally destroy yours. That's the situation? That's one way to phrase it. Is there another way? I protected myself from a coordinated campaign to paint me as a predator and steal the life I'd built. Marcus chose to commit crimes while trying to achieve that goal. I just made sure those crimes had consequences. Sarah nodded slowly. But you knew he'd commit the crimes. You built the trap specifically so he'd commit them. I built legal protections. He chose to attack them illegally. That's sophistry, Jessica said. And you know it. You manipulated the situation so that Marcus would hang himself. That's not protection. That's revenge. Quiet revenge, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Jessica leaned back against the wall, studying me with the kind of intensity she usually reserved for cross-examining hostile witnesses. She was a litigator, the aggressive kind, and she'd inherited my ability to see several moves ahead. Yes, revenge would be destroying him for its own sake. This was strategic self-defense. Strategic self-defense that you planned for 2 years. Yes, Dad. Sarah's voice was gentler. We're not judging you. We're just trying to understand. Because this is... She gestured vaguely. A lot. I set down my bowl, looked at my daughters, these brilliant, strong women who'd survived my first divorce and come out the other side with their capacity for love intact. Do you want to know the truth? I asked. The real truth? Always, they said in unison. I'm not sure I'm a good person anymore. I used to be. I used to believe in giving people second chances, in assuming the best, in love conquering obstacles. And then Marcus spent 2 years systematically destroying my marriage while convincing everyone I was the villain. And somewhere in that process, I became someone who could plan a 2-year trap. Someone who could watch it spring closed and feel nothing but tired satisfaction. And I don't know how to reconcile that person with the person I thought I was. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. The kind of silence that means people are actually listening instead of waiting to talk. Dad, Sarah finally said, you're not a villain because you refused to be a victim. Marcus forced you into an impossible situation. He gave you exactly 2 choices. Let him destroy you or protect yourself. You chose to protect yourself. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you smart. Smart and good aren't the same thing. No, Jessica agreed. But they're not mutually exclusive either. You did what you had to do. Marcus did what he chose to do. His choices were criminal. Yours were just. Meticulous. Frighteningly meticulous, Sarah added. Seriously? The identical house thing? That's some talented Mr. Ripley level planning. I prefer to think of it as comprehensive risk management. You would. We finished dinner surrounded by empty bowls and the comfortable silence of family who don't need to fill every moment with words. Then Jessica poured 3 extremely generous glasses of the mezcal, which did, in fact, taste like either a cure or an amnesia agent, possibly both, and we toasted to survival. To Dad, Sarah said, who taught us that sometimes the best revenge is just being really, really prepared. To Dad, Jessica echoed, who is absolutely terrifying when provoked, but at least uses his powers for defense instead of conquest. To my daughters, I said, who flew across the country to eat florfo with their disaster of a father and somehow make him feel less alone. We drank. The mezcal burned. Outside, the rain continued its drumming percussion against windows. And inside, for the first time in 2 years, I felt something that might eventually become okay. Sunday morning arrived without rain. Instead, the sky was that particular shade of Pacific Northwest gray that isn't quite overcast, but isn't quite clear, a liminal space between weather patterns, between one thing and another. Appropriate, I thought, for the conversation I was about to have. Sarah and Jessica left at 10 a.m., both of them extracting promises that I'd call them daily, that I'd see a therapist, that I wouldn't hermit up in my empty house, with only regret for company. We're serious about the therapy thing, Jessica said at the door, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. You just outsmarted a federal criminal in a 2-year chess game. That's not normal dad behavior. You need to talk to someone about it. I'll think about it. Dad, I'll do it. I promise. Sarah hugged me, hard. Call us after you talk to Diane. No matter what happens, even if it's 3 in the morning. Especially if it's 3 in the morning. I will. And Dad, whatever you decide, whether you forgive her or walk away or something in between, we support you. You know that, right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. After they left, I stood in my empty house, less empty now, with their laughter and concern still echoing in the spaces, and prepared myself for the conversation I'd been avoiding for 2 years. The one where Diane and I would finally tell each other the truth. I arrived at the house, her house, the one that used to be ours, the one that was now essentially worthless at 2 p.m. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Quiet, suburban, the kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturdays and waved to their neighbors and had no idea that 3 doors down, a man had systematically defrauded his mother while trying to save her. I parked on the street, studying the house through my windshield. 2 years of my life had happened behind those walls. 2 years of trying to build something solid with someone I loved while her son dismantled it brick by brick. 2 years of careful navigation and mounting suspicion and the slow erosion of trust. Looking at it now, it just looked like a house. Wood and brick and windows. Nothing special. Nothing worth destroying a family over. But that's the thing about houses. They're never just structures. They're symbols, legacies, the physical manifestation of everything we think we've earned or deserve or built. Marcus hadn't been protecting a house. He'd been protecting his place in his mother's story. His inheritance, yes, but more than that, his identity as the son who saved her, who knew better, who was the real hero. And I'd been the threat to that narrative. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. It opened before I could knock. Diane stood there, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Her hair, usually styled with care, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and her eyes, those gray-green eyes I'd fallen in love with, were swollen and red-rimmed from crying. "Robert," she said, "just my name. No greeting, no pleasantries." "Diane, come in, please." The house felt different, smaller, somehow. Or maybe I'd just grown too large for it. Maybe I'd never really fit here in the first place. We sat in the living room, on the couch we'd picked out together at a furniture store in Bellevue, arguing good-naturedly about whether microfiber or leather was more practical. She'd won. The microfiber had seemed important to her. Now it just felt like fabric. Nothing more. "Marcus is upstairs," she said quietly. "Under house arrest. He has an ankle monitor. He's not supposed to leave except for court appearances and meetings with his lawyer. He's not taking it well." "I imagine not. He still thinks you did this, that you orchestrated everything to destroy him. He won't listen when I try to explain what actually happened." "What do you think actually happened, Diane?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in months. Clarity. The fog of Marcus's manipulation had lifted, and she was finally seeing the landscape clearly. "I think my son convinced me that the man I loved was a con artist. I think he spent 2 years poisoning me against you while you were actually trying to protect me. I think he committed multiple felonies, trying to save me from a threat that didn't exist, and I think I let it happen because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of betraying my first husband's memory. Of moving on too fast. Of being happy with someone who wasn't him. Marcus made it easy to second-guess everything. Every decision you made, every suggestion, every act of love, he reframed it as manipulation. And I let him, because it was easier than admitting I was afraid." She started crying then. Not the gentle tears from the gallery 2 years ago, but hard, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I sat there, watching her unravel, and felt nothing but a vast, empty exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I chose him over you. I chose his fear over your love. And I destroyed us." "Yes," I said simply. You did. She flinched, like I'd struck her. But Marcus destroyed himself, I continued. I didn't make him forge documents, didn't make him commit fraud, didn't make him so convinced of his own righteousness that he broke the law trying to prove it. He did that on his own. But you knew he would. I knew he was capable of it. There's a difference. Is there? The same question everyone kept asking. The same question I kept asking myself. I don't know anymore. We sat in silence for a long moment. Somewhere upstairs, I heard footsteps. Marcus, pacing in whatever room they'd confined him to. A caged animal, furious and frightened. The FBI agent, Diane said quietly, the one who questioned me, she showed me everything. The trust documents, the loan agreements, the timeline of when you secured each loan, and why. She walked me through it all, step by step, and I realized you weren't stealing from me. You were building a firewall. You knew Marcus was going to make a move, and you were making sure that when he did, I'd still have something left. The trust is yours, all $2.4 million. I never touched it, never intended to, but the house is worthless now. I know. I made it that way, because I knew Marcus would go after it. Would try to sell it, would try to claim it, would do something dramatic and illegal to prove he'd saved you, and I needed to make sure that when he did, he'd destroy himself instead of us. So, you sacrificed my house to trap my son. I sacrificed a house that was already lost. Marcus was going to take it one way or another. I just made sure that when he did, you'd still have the equity, and he'd have the consequences. She stared at me, and I saw her trying to reconcile the man she'd married with the man who'd orchestrated such an elaborate defense. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I thought I knew you, thought I understood you. But this," she gestured vaguely, "this level of planning, this ruthlessness, this patience, I never saw this person. This is the person Marcus forced me to become. You want to know the truth, Diane? The real truth? 2 years ago, I was just a guy who fell in love with a widow at a gallery. I wasn't strategic. I wasn't ruthless. I was just hopeful. I thought we could build something good together. I thought your son would come around. I thought love was enough." I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street where I used to live, and then Marcus decided I was the enemy, and you chose to believe him. And I realized that hope wasn't enough, that love wasn't enough, that the only way to survive was to be smarter than the person trying to destroy me. So I became smart, I became patient, I became ruthless when I needed to be, and I hate that. I hate that Marcus turned me into someone who could plan a 2-year trap. But I hate being a victim more. So you made him the victim instead. No, I made him face the consequences of his own actions. There's a difference. You keep saying that. There's a difference. But I'm not sure I believe you anymore. I turned to face her. Good. You shouldn't believe me automatically. You should look at the evidence and make your own decision. That's what you should have done 2 years ago. The words hung between us, sharp and true. Diane looked down at her hands. I spoke with the buyer's attorney yesterday. They're suing me for $3.2 million. The sale price plus damages. They say I knowingly participated in the fraud, that I had to have known about the liens. Did you? No, I didn't look. Marcus handled everything. He said you'd put the house in some kind of complicated trust situation, and he was unwinding it. He said he was protecting me, and I signed whatever he put in front of me because I trusted him. You trusted him more than you trusted me. Yes. She looked up, met my eyes, and that was my mistake, my choice, my failure. I see that now. What are you going to do? My attorney says I can probably settle for less than the full amount. Maybe $1.8 million. The trust will cover it. I'll have some left over. Enough to live on if I'm careful. But the house is gone. This house. The one my first husband bought. The one I raised Marcus in. The one that was supposed to be his inheritance. It's gone. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it. I'm sorry Marcus forced this. I'm sorry you're caught in the fallout. I'm sorry we couldn't find a way through. Are you sorry enough to help me? The question caught me off guard. Help you how? The lawyers, the fees, the settlement. It's going to bankrupt me even with the trust. And I know I don't have the right to ask. I know I burned us down and I'm standing in the ashes asking you to rebuild. But Robert, I'm desperate, and you're the only person who understands what actually happened. I studied her face, saw the fear there, the genuine terror of someone watching their entire world collapse. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just this vast, empty space where love used to be. The divorce papers, I said quietly. Tom drew them up with generous terms. You keep the trust, free and clear. I keep my house. We split the remaining joint assets, 60-40 inches, your favor. No alimony, clean break. If you sign them, if you don't contest anything, I'll pay your legal fees for the buyer's lawsuit. I'll hire you the best defense attorney in Seattle. I'll make sure you come out of this with something left. Why would you do that? After everything? Because you were right. I did love you, and some part of me still does. Not the version of you that chose Marcus over me, but the woman I met at the gallery. The one who cried at abstract paintings and made the best lasagna I'd ever tasted. That woman deserves better than total ruin. Tears were streaming down her face now. I don't deserve your kindness. Probably not. But I don't want to be the kind of man who destroys people, even when they've destroyed him. I've done enough of that already. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Deliberate. We both turned as Marcus appeared in the doorway. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, the ankle monitor visible beneath his sweatpants like a brand. But his expression wasn't broken. It was furious. You, he said, staring at me with pure hatred. You have the balls to come into my mother's house after what you've done? Marcus Diane started. No, Mom, no. This man destroyed our family. He trapped me. He manipulated everything so I'd look like the criminal while he gets away with stealing from you. And now he's here. What? Gloating? Making sure we know we've lost? I stood very still. I'm here because your mother asked me to come, and I'm offering to help her with the legal fees your actions created. My actions? My actions? You're the one who put all those loans against the house. You're the one who created this whole mess. I created a legal financial structure that protected your mother's assets. You committed fraud trying to steal them. We're not the same, Marcus. You manipulated her. You isolated her. I did nothing but love her. You're the one who couldn't accept that. You're the one who decided I was a threat. You're the one who spent 2 years poisoning her against me. And when that wasn't enough, you broke the law. You forged documents. You committed wire fraud. You sold property you didn't own. Those were your choices, Marcus. Own them. He took a step toward me, fists clenched. The ankle monitor beeped a warning. I should have stopped you 2 years ago. Should have convinced Mom to leave before you got your hooks in her. But I thought she was smarter than this. I thought she'd see through you eventually. I didn't realize you'd gotten so deep into her head that she'd choose you over her own son. She didn't choose me over you, I said quietly. She chose you, every single time. That's why we're here. That's why this marriage failed. Because when you forced her to pick, she picked you. And you still destroyed her life anyway. The truth of that hit him like a physical blow. I saw it in his eyes the moment he realized that his mother had given him everything he'd asked for, and he'd repaid her by committing crimes in her name. Get out, he whispered. Get out of this house. Marcus, stop it, Diane said, her voice stronger now. Robert is here because I invited him. He's trying to help. Help? He's trying to manipulate you again. Can't you see that? This is what he does. He offers just enough kindness to make you doubt yourself, to make you think he's the good guy. But he's not, Mom. He's a con artist. He's been playing us from the beginning. No, Diane said, standing up. You've been playing me, Marcus. You convinced me Robert was a threat when he was actually trying to protect me. You committed crimes to save me when I didn't need saving. You destroyed my financial security while claiming to protect it. Robert isn't the con artist here. You are. The silence that followed was the sound of a family shattering. Marcus stared at his mother like he'd never seen her before. You're taking his side? After everything? After I gave up my wedding, my freedom, my entire life trying to protect you? No one asked you to do that. I didn't ask you to forge my signature. I didn't ask you to sell my house. I didn't ask you to commit federal crimes. You did all of that on your own, Marcus. You did it because you couldn't accept that I'd moved on, that I'd found someone who made me happy, that maybe, just maybe, your father wasn't the only man I could ever love. Don't, Marcus's voice broke, don't bring Dad into this. Your father would be horrified by what you've done. He would never have wanted this, never wanted you to destroy yourself, trying to preserve some fantasy of his perfect family. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? You're my son. I love you. But what you've done, the lying, the manipulation, the crimes, I can't defend that. I won't defend that. And I won't let you blame Robert for the consequences of your own choices. And the fine. And one. Reaper. And fine. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then at me. Then back to her. If you sign those divorce papers, he said slowly, each word deliberate. If you let him walk away while I go to prison, if you choose him over your own son even now, I will never forgive you. Never. Diane's face crumpled, but her voice stayed steady. Then I guess you won't forgive me, because I'm signing them. Not because I'm choosing Robert, but because it's the right thing to do, because he's offering me a way out of the disaster you created, and because I'm tired, Marcus. I'm so tired of your anger and your suspicion and your need to control everything. I just want it to end. End quote. I'm so tired of your anger. End quote. End quote. Fine. Marcus's voice was ice. Then it ends. All of it. When I get out of prison, if I get out, don't expect me to come back here. Don't expect me to call. Don't expect anything. You've made your choice. Live with it. He turned and walked back upstairs. The ankle monitor beeped with each step. Diane collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing. I wanted to comfort her, wanted to tell her it would be okay, but I wasn't sure it would be, and I wasn't sure that was my role anymore. I've lost him, she whispered. I've lost my son. No, he lost himself. There's a difference. She looked up at me through tears. Does everything have a difference with you? Is everything just careful parsing and strategic thinking and... Yes, I interrupted. Because that's what kept me alive through this. That's what kept me from becoming the villain he accused me of being. Careful parsing, strategic thinking, the ability to see the difference between what's true and what people want to believe is true. I moved toward the door. I'll have Tom send over the papers. Sign them. Don't contest anything. I'll take care of your legal fees like I promised. And then, we're done. You go your way, I go mine. And we try to forget that we ever thought we could build something together. Robert, wait. She stood up, crossed to me. Is there any chance, any possibility that we could? I don't know. Start over? Try again? After all of this settles? I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman I'd loved. The woman who'd chosen fear over trust. The woman who was finally seeing clearly, but only after everything had burned. No, I said gently. There's no chance. Because even if you believe me now, even if you see what Marcus did, there will always be doubt. There will always be that voice in your head asking if I'm manipulating you, if I'm playing some long game, if this is all another elaborate trap, and I can't live with someone who's always waiting for me to betray them. But you're a good person, Diane. You made bad choices, but you're not a bad person. You'll recover from this. You'll find your way. You'll probably even rebuild your relationship with Marcus eventually. But you won't do any of that with me, because I can't save you. I can only save myself. I opened the door, stepped out into the gray afternoon. Robert, I turned back. For what it's worth, I really did love you. Before Marcus got in my head, before the fear took over, I really did. I know, I said. That's the saddest part. Then I walked away from the house, from the marriage, from the 2 years of careful navigation and mounting suspicion and the slow death of hope. I got in my car, drove 3 doors down to my own house, and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, watching nothing, feeling nothing, just breathing. My phone buzzed. "Sarah, how did it go?" I typed back, "It's over, really over. I'll call you tonight." Then I went inside my empty house, poured myself a very large whiskey, and sat in the leather chair Derek the furniture salesman had promised would bring me joy. It didn't, but it was comfortable, and for now, that was enough. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. The furniture arrived on Monday, transforming my empty house into something that resembled a home. The bed, the couch, the dining table that could seat 6, but probably never would. I arranged it all carefully, creating spaces for a life I wasn't sure how to live yet. Tom called on Wednesday to tell me Diane had signed the divorce papers. No changes, no negotiations, just her signature on the dotted line, accompanied by a note that said simply, "Thank you for being more generous than I deserved." I'd read that note 3 times, then filed it away with all the other documents that marked the end of things. Marcus's bail hearing happened on Thursday. The judge, unimpressed by his attorney's arguments about family ties and community roots, had set bail at $500,000. Diane had somehow managed to scrape it together, probably by taking a loan against the trust, though Tom's inquiries couldn't confirm. Marcus was released that afternoon, still under house arrest, still facing 7 to 12 years in federal prison. I learned all this from the Seattle Times website, which had been following the case with the kind of gleeful attention the media reserves for fallen golden boys. Local tech consultant's fraud scheme unravels. One headline read, "Mother and son caught in real estate scandal," read another. My name appeared in exactly none of them. Tom had made sure of that. As far as the public narrative went, I was just the victim's husband or the woman's spouse, anonymous, unremarkable. Exactly how I wanted it. The house on Diane Street, the worthless one, the trap had been seized by the court as part of the restitution proceedings. The buyer's lawsuit was moving forward. Marcus's assets had been frozen. The whole thing was a legal catastrophe that would take years to untangle. And I was free of all of it. Legally, at least. Emotionally was another story. I went back to work on the Monday of the 4th week. My boss, Richard, called me into his office at 10 a.m. sharp. He was a decent guy, former Marine, straight talker, the kind of manager who actually cared about his people rather than just their numbers. "Robert," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, "close the door." I did. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Are you okay to be here?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Your wife's son was just arrested for federal fraud. Your marriage is over. Your name has been kept out of the press, but everyone in this office knows what happened, or thinks they know. And you're sitting here pretending everything is normal. That's not fine. That's compartmentalization bordering on dissociation." I looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want me to say, Richard?" "I want you to be honest. Are you going to be able to do your job? Because if you need time, bereavement leave, personal leave, whatever you want to call it, you can take it. No questions asked." "I don't need time. I need routine. I need normal. I need to not sit in my empty house thinking about everything I've lost." He studied me with those sharp marine eyes, the ones that had probably seen men fall apart in far worse circumstances than mine. "All right, but I'm watching you. And if I see you struggling, if your work slips, if you start showing signs that you're not handling this, we're having this conversation again. Deal?" "Deal." "One more thing." He pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "HR flagged this. We've had 3 calls this week from reporters trying to get comments about you. About your involvement in the case. About your relationship with Marcus Donovan. I've told them all to pound sand, but you should know, they're circling." I opened the folder. Contact information for reporters from the Times, from local TV stations, from a true crime podcast that apparently specialized in white-collar betrayals. "They think there's a story here," Richard continued. "The wronged husband who maybe wasn't so wronged. The stepfather who might have been the real mastermind. They're trying to find an angle that makes you interesting. I'm not interesting. I'm just a guy who didn't want to be a victim. I know that. You know that. But they don't care about what's true. They care about what sells. So here's my advice. Don't talk to any of them. Don't respond to messages. Don't try to set the record straight. Just let it die. Eventually, they'll find someone else to harass. Thanks, Richard. Don't thank me. Just do your job and keep your head down. And Robert, for what it's worth, I think you handled an impossible situation as well as anyone could. What that kid did to you, trying to destroy your life while claiming to protect his mother, that's beyond the pale. You had every right to protect yourself. After I left his office, I sat at my desk and stared at the folder of reporter contacts. They wanted a villain, someone to blame, someone to build a narrative around. They wanted me to be either the hero who'd outsmarted a criminal or the mastermind who'd framed an innocent kid. Binary, simple, easily digestible for a 3-minute news segment. But I wasn't either of those things. I was just tired. I dropped the folder in the recycling bin and got to work. That evening, I met Tom at a whiskey bar downtown. It was the kind of place that took itself too seriously. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a bartender with an elaborate mustache who treated cocktail making like performance art. But the whiskey was good, and the lighting was dim, and no one bothered you. Tom slid into the booth across from me, his suit jacket already loosened, tie at half-mast. He looked as exhausted as I felt. "The divorce will be final in 60 days, he said without preamble. Standard waiting period. Diane's attorney confirmed she's not contesting anything. The settlement stands as written. You're a free man, Robert. Officially." Great. The word came out flat. You don't sound excited. Should I be? I just spent 2 years of my life in a marriage that ended with my stepson in prison and my wife believing I was a criminal. What's there to be excited about? Tom signaled the bartender, ordered something obscure and expensive. You survived. You protected yourself. You came out of this with your finances intact and your reputation mostly unscathed. That's a win, by any measure. It doesn't feel like winning. No, it feels like surviving. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. See? I can do your thing too. Despite everything, I found myself almost smiling back. The bartender brought Tom's drink something amber and aromatic that probably had a story attached to it. Tom took a sip, savored it, then set it down carefully. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to not lose your shit when I tell you. That's a great opening. Marcus's attorney reached out to me yesterday. Off the record, he wants to negotiate. I went very still. Negotiate what? A deal. Marcus will plead guilty to all charges, except the 7-year sentence. Agree to make full restitution to the buyer. In exchange, he wants you to write a letter to the judge. A victim impact statement. Asking for leniency. You're joking. I'm not. His attorney says Marcus is finally starting to understand the magnitude of what he did, that he's remorseful, that he wants to take responsibility. But he's terrified of spending 7 years in federal prison. He thinks if you, the primary victim, ask the judge to show mercy, it might knock a year or 2 off his sentence. I stared at Tom. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd present the offer to you. I didn't tell him you'd laugh him out of the room, though that was my first instinct. Why would I do this? Why would I help the person who tried to destroy my life? Because he's not asking you to forgive him. He's asking you to be merciful. There's a difference. Stop using my words against me. Tom leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm saying you should think about it. Because here's the thing, if you write that letter, if you ask for leniency, it changes the narrative. It makes you the bigger person. It makes Marcus look even worse, because he had to beg for mercy from the man he tried to destroy. And it might actually help you move on. How dumb is Inton? Because revenge is satisfying in the moment, but it's corrosive long-term. Trust me, I've seen it 100 times. People who spend years getting even, who finally win, who destroy their enemies, and then they realize they've become someone they don't recognize. Someone hard and bitter and unable to let go. You're already halfway there, Robert. I can see it in you. The anger, the exhaustion, The way you can't quite feel anything anymore. Writing that letter showing mercy when you don't have to. That might be the thing that lets you start healing. Or it might just be one more way for Marcus to manipulate the situation. Maybe. Probably, even. But here's the question. Do you care? If Marcus gets 6 years instead of 7, does that actually affect your life? Or is it just satisfying to know he's suffering as much as possible? I picked up my whiskey, drained it, felt the burn. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. His attorney needs an answer by Friday. Until then, just sit with it. See how it feels. I didn't go straight home after the bar. Instead, I drove. No destination, just movement. Through downtown Seattle, with its glittering towers and homeless encampments. Through neighborhoods I'd never explored, streets I'd never traveled, past the lives of strangers who had their own catastrophes and triumphs and quiet desperation. I ended up at Golden Gardens Park, on the beach, watching the sun set over the Olympics. The beach was nearly empty. A few dog walkers, a couple holding hands at the water's edge, a woman doing yoga on a towel, perfectly balanced in a pose that looked like prayer or surrender. I sat on a piece of driftwood, worn smooth by water and time, and thought about mercy. Marcus didn't deserve it. That much was clear. He'd tried to destroy me, had destroyed his mother's financial security, had committed multiple felonies out of self-righteous fury. He deserved every year of the sentence he was facing. But deserving and getting aren't the same thing. And mercy, by definition, is giving people something they don't deserve. The question was, what kind of person did I want to be on the other side of this? Did I want to be the man who'd outsmarted a criminal and watched him suffer? The man who'd built an elaborate trap and felt nothing but cold satisfaction when it closed? The man who could calculate angles and plan contingencies and protect himself so completely that he forgot how to feel anything else? Or did I want to be the man who could show mercy even when it wasn't deserved? Who could choose compassion over vengeance? Who could walk away from this with his humanity intact? If you've ever stood at that crossroads between justified anger and undeserved grace, you know it's not simple. Anger feels right. It feels earned. Grace feels like weakness. Like letting someone off the hook, like betraying yourself. But maybe that's the point. Maybe grace is supposed to feel like betrayal, like giving up something you've earned the right to hold on to. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. Dad? Everything okay? I need advice, and I need you to be honest with me, not just supportive. Okay, shoot. I explained the situation, Tom's conversation, Marcus's request, the letter. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. That's a hell of a thing to ask. I know. What does your gut tell you? My gut tells me to tell him to go to hell, that he doesn't deserve my mercy, that I've given enough. And what does your heart tell you? I don't know if I have a heart anymore. I think Marcus and Diane hollowed it out and filled the space with strategy and contingency planning. Dad, stop. You're not heartless. You're hurt. There's a difference. I smiled despite myself. Everyone keeps telling me about differences, because you're always trying to split hairs and find the technical truth instead of the emotional one. So here's the emotional truth. Marcus is a piece of shit who deserves to suffer. But if you spend the rest of your life making sure he suffers as much as possible, you're going to become someone you don't recognize, someone who measures their worth by other people's pain. Is that who you want to be? No. Then write the letter. Not for him, for you. So you can look in the mirror in 5 years and know you chose to be kind, even when you didn't have to be. That's very wise for someone who once ate an entire pizza while standing over the sink at 2 a.m. Hey, that pizza had just broken up with me. I was processing. I laughed. Actually laughed. Thanks, kiddo. Anytime. And Dad? Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. Don't forget that. I went home and sat at my new desk in my new office and opened my laptop. Stared at the blank document for 20 minutes. Then I started typing. Your Honor, my name is Robert Hartley, and I am writing regarding the sentencing of Marcus Donovan. Mr. Donovan committed multiple felonies against me and his mother, Crimes born from his conviction that I was a threat to his family. He forged documents, committed fraud, and caused substantial financial and emotional harm. I would be within my rights to ask for the maximum sentence, to demand that he face the full consequences of his actions, and I will not pretend that a part of me doesn't want exactly that. But I'm writing instead to ask for mercy. Not because Mr. Donovan deserves it by any objective measure, he does not, but because I've spent 2 years preparing for his attack, planning my defense, becoming someone I barely recognize in order to survive what he tried to do to me, and I'm tired of being that person. Mr. Donovan believed he was protecting his mother from a predator. He was wrong, but the belief was genuine. His methods were criminal, his judgment catastrophically flawed, but the underlying motivation, however misguided, came from love. I don't forgive him. I may never forgive him, but I understand the fear that drove him, the terror of losing someone you love, the desperation to protect them, even when they don't need protection. I ask the court to consider that Mr. Donovan is 28 years old, that he has no prior criminal record, that he acted out of fear rather than greed, that 7 years in federal prison will destroy any chance he has of building a meaningful life. I ask for leniency, not because he deserves it, but because mercy is what separates us from our worst impulses. Whatever sentence you impose, I will accept. But I wanted you to know that the primary victim in this case, the person who had the most to lose, believes that compassion serves justice better than vengeance. Respectfully, Robert Hartley. I read it 3 times, changed a few words, read it again, then I saved it and sent it to Tom. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "Did you actually write this?" Tom asked. "Yes." You know, this makes you look like a saint and Marcus look like an even bigger asshole, right? His attorney asked for this, thinking it would help. But this letter, it's going to highlight just how much grace you're showing compared to how little he deserves. The judge is going to read this and think, this victim is advocating for mercy, and the criminal still only cares about himself. Good. Then everyone wins. Marcus gets his letter. I get to feel like a human being again. And the judge gets to see the whole picture before deciding. Tom was quiet for a moment. "You're a complicated man, Robert Hartley." "I'm a tired man who wants to stop thinking about Marcus Donovan." "Fair enough. I'll file this with the court tomorrow. Sentencing is in 3 weeks. After that, this is all over. Promise?" "I promise. One way or another, in 3 weeks, you get to start fresh." After we hung up, I walked through my house, my sanctuary, my fortress, my escape, and looked at the furniture I'd chosen, the space I'd created, the life I was trying to build. It was nice. It was comfortable. It was completely, utterly empty of everything that made it worth having. I poured another whiskey, sat in the leather chair that was supposed to bring me joy, and wondered what came next. What do you do when you've won the war but lost everything that made victory meaningful? What do you do when you've protected yourself so completely that there's nothing left to protect? What do you do when the battle is over and you're standing in the ruins, alive but not sure what living actually means anymore? I didn't have answers, but I had 3 weeks until Marcus's sentencing. 3 weeks until the final chapter of this nightmare closed. 3 weeks to figure out who I was supposed to be on the other side. I raised my glass to the empty room. To survival, I said to no one. The house didn't answer, but then again, I didn't expect it to. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late November. I almost didn't go. Tom had made it clear I wasn't required to appear. The letter I'd written would be filed with the court, read by the judge, considered in the sentencing decision. My presence was optional, a choice rather than an obligation. If you want closure, Tom had said, you should go. If you want to move on, you should stay home. There's no wrong answer here. But there was, I realized, because avoiding the hearing meant Marcus still had power over me, still dictated my choices, still occupied the mental real estate I was trying to reclaim. So I went. The federal courthouse was one of those buildings designed to inspire awe and intimidation, in equal measure all marble and security checkpoints, and the weight of institutional authority. I'd been here once before, years ago, for jury duty. had spent 3 days listening to testimony about insurance fraud and ultimately deciding that yes, the defendant had lied, and no, there were no mitigating circumstances that made the lying okay. I wondered what this jury, the judge in this case, would decide about Marcus. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights humming overhead, American flag in the corner looking slightly faded. About 30 people scattered across the gallery benches. I recognized a few faces from the Seattle Times coverage reporters, probably. Some of Marcus's friends from business school. His ex-fiancée, Becca, sitting alone in the back row, her face carefully neutral. And Diane. She sat in the front row, directly behind the defense table, wearing a navy blue suit that looked expensive and severe. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, but I could see the toll from across the room. The weight loss, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself very still, as if movement might shatter her completely. She turned when I entered, her eyes finding mine across the courtroom. I gave her a small nod. Nothing more. She nodded back, then looked away quickly, like the sight of me caused physical pain. I took a seat 3 rows back, on the opposite side of the aisle, far enough to maintain distance, close enough to see everything. Marcus was brought in at 9:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to start. He wore a dark suit, crisp white shirt, conservative tie. His lawyer had clearly coached him on courtroom presentation, look respectable, look remorseful, look like someone who made a mistake rather than someone who is a mistake. But I could see through the costume, see the anger in the set of his shoulders, the defiance in the way he held his head, the barely contained fury that this was happening to him, that he was the one being judged, when he'd been so certain he was the hero of this story. He glanced around the courtroom, his eyes landing on his mother. Something passed between them, a look I couldn't quite read. Pain, maybe, or regret, or just the acknowledgement of mutual destruction. Then his eyes found me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The stepson and the stepfather, the accuser and the accused, the person who'd committed crimes and the person who'd been ready for them. I didn't look away. Didn't flinch, just held his gaze until he broke first, turning back to face forward. Small victory, meaningless in the grand scheme, but satisfying nonetheless. The bailiff called the courtroom to order at exactly 10 a.m. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Weinstein. We stood. The judge entered a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every excuse, every plea, every desperate justification imaginable, and found them all wanting. She took her seat. We took ours. "We're here for the sentencing of Marcus James Donovan," she began, her voice carrying the weight of bureaucratic finality. "Mr. Donovan has entered a guilty plea to multiple counts of wire fraud, real estate fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The prosecution has recommended a sentence of 7 years in federal prison with supervised release to follow. The defense has submitted a request for leniency. I've reviewed all the materials, including the victim impact statement from Mr. Robert Hartley." She paused, looked directly at me. "Mr. Hartley, I want to acknowledge your presence here today, and I want to acknowledge the letter you submitted. It's rare to see a victim advocate for mercy with such clarity and thoughtfulness. The court appreciates your perspective." I nodded, unsure if I was supposed to respond verbally. "However," Judge Weinstein continued, turning her attention to Marcus, "I want to be clear that mercy is not the same as absolution. Mr. Donovan, you committed serious crimes. You violated your mother's trust. You forged her signature on legal documents. You defrauded a home buyer of millions of dollars. You did all of this while claiming to act in your mother's best interest, which makes your actions not just criminal, but morally reprehensible." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Your attorney has argued that you acted out of love, out of a misguided attempt to protect your mother from what you perceived as a threat. The court recognizes that your motivations were not purely financial. But motivation doesn't excuse action. What you did was wrong, illegal, and harmful to multiple people, including the person you claim to be protecting. She picked up a document from her desk. My letter, I realized. Mr. Hartley writes that you acted out of fear, that the underlying motivation came from love, however misguided. He asks this court to consider that you're a young man with no prior record who made catastrophic errors in judgment. He asks for mercy. Judge Weinstein set the letter down, looked at Marcus for a long moment. The question before this court is whether mercy serves justice in this case, whether leniency would appropriately reflect the seriousness of your crimes while acknowledging that you are not, perhaps, an irredeemable criminal, whether there is value in giving you a chance to rebuild your life after serving your time. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the reporters had stopped their note-taking. Everyone was waiting. Mr. Donovan, please stand. Marcus stood, his lawyer beside him. I've given considerable thought to this sentencing, Judge Weinstein said. I've weighed the severity of your crimes against the mitigating factors. I've considered the fact that your victim, the person most harmed by your actions, has asked for leniency, and I've thought about what sentence would best serve both justice and the possibility of rehabilitation. Another pause. Deliberately dramatic, I thought. Judges probably learned this in judge school, how to maximize the weight of the moment. The court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also be required to make full restitution to the home buyers you defrauded in the amount of $2. $3 million. You will be prohibited from any position of financial authority or fiduciary responsibility for a period of 10 years following your release. Do you understand this sentence? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice steady, despite everything. Do you have anything you'd like to say before this hearing concludes? Marcus turned, slowly, and looked at his mother, then at me. I want to apologize, he said, to my mother, to Mr. Hartley, to the people I defrauded. I was wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry. The words sounded rehearsed, coached, but there was something underneath them, a genuine crack in the armor that made me think he might actually mean it. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he meant it, wanted to believe that all of this hadn't been completely pointless. The court accepts your apology for the record, Judge Weinstein said. But understand, Mr. Donovan, apologies don't undo harm. Actions have consequences. And the consequence of your actions is 5 years away from everything and everyone you know. I hope you use that time to genuinely reflect on the person you want to be. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a crack that felt final. People started filing out of the courtroom almost immediately. The reporters rushed to catch Marcus's lawyer for a comment. Some of Marcus's friends, former friends, probably gathered in hushed conversations near the exit. I stayed in my seat, watching Diane approach the defense table where Marcus was conferring with his attorney. She reached out tentatively, touched his arm. He turned, and I saw his face crumple. Saw him hug his mother like he was drowning and she was the only solid thing left in the world. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, while the courtroom emptied around them. I should have left, should have respected their moment, but I found myself unable to move, unable to look away from this tableau of mutual destruction and desperate love. Finally, Marcus pulled back, said something to his mother I couldn't hear. She nodded, wiping tears from her face. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me. Without the anger, without the defiance, just looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He said something to his attorney, who nodded. Then he walked across the courtroom, past the empty benches, until he was standing in front of me. Mr. Hartley, he said formally. Marcus, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe that I'm sorry. But I want you to know that I read your letter, the one you sent to the judge, and it made me realize something. What's that? That you're a better man than I gave you credit for. That I was so convinced you were the villain that I became one myself, trying to stop you. And that's on me, not you. Not my mom, me. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the game. I didn't find one. You spent 2 years trying to destroy me, Marcus. 2 years poisoning your mother against me. 2 years forcing me to become someone I didn't want to be, just to survive. And now you're sorry? Yes? It's too late. I know. We stood there for a moment. Two men who'd hurt each other in different ways, for different reasons, with different consequences. For what it's worth, I said quietly, I hope you use those 5 years well. I hope you figure out who you are when you're not defined by protecting people who don't need protection. And I hope, when you get out, you can build something better than this. Thank you, he said, for the letter, for asking for mercy when I didn't deserve it, for being better than I was. Then he turned and walked back to his mother, to his lawyer, to whatever processing and transport came next. And I walked out of the courtroom, through the marble halls, past the security checkpoints, into the gray November morning. Tom was waiting outside, leaning against his car, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. How do you feel? He asked, handing me one. I thought about it, really thought about it. Lighter, I finally said. I feel lighter. Good. That's good. He took a sip of his coffee. You did a good thing in there, Robert. Not many people could have done what you did. I didn't do anything. I just wrote a letter. You showed mercy when you had every right to demand vengeance. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. We stood in silence for a moment, drinking our coffee, watching people rush past us into their own dramas and catastrophes. What now? Tom asked. Now I figure out how to live a life that isn't defined by surviving someone else's attack. Any ideas how to do that? Not a clue. He smiled. Well, you've got time. And for once, you're not on a deadline. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the gallery where I'd met Diane 2 years ago. The one with the abstract paintings and the afternoon light and the moment where everything had seemed possible. It was closed for renovation, according to a sign on the door. Reopening spring 2026. New exhibits, same vision. I stood outside, hands in my pockets, looking at my reflection in the darkened windows. 2 years ago, I'd walked into that gallery and met a woman crying in front of a painting, had made a decision in that moment to approach her, to offer coffee, to open myself up to the possibility of connection. And everything that had happened since, the love, the betrayal, the elaborate trap, the federal courtroom, the divorce, the empty house, all of it had flowed from that single choice. If you've ever wondered whether one moment can change your entire life, I can tell you, it can. For better and for worse, for love and for ruin, for everything you hoped for and everything you feared. The question was, would I make that choice again? Would I approach the crying woman in the gallery, knowing everything that would follow? I stood there for a long time, trying to answer that question honestly, and I realized, yes, I would. Because even with all the pain, even with all the destruction, there had been moments of genuine happiness. Mornings with Diane, laughing at something stupid on TV. Dinners where we'd talked for hours about nothing important. Quiet evenings where we'd just existed comfortably in each other's presence. Those moments had been real, even if they hadn't lasted. And I'd rather have had them and lost them than never have had them at all. That realization felt like something breaking open inside my chest. Not breaking apart, breaking open, like a shell cracking to let something new emerge. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. Hey, Dad, how did it go? 5 years. He got 5 years. How do you feel about that? I feel like maybe I can start healing now. Like maybe I don't have to be the person I became in order to survive. That's good, Dad. That's really good. Sarah, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think people can change? Really change? Or are we just who we are, with minor variations? She was quiet for a moment, thinking. I think people can change if they want to badly enough. If they're willing to do the hard work of looking at themselves honestly and not liking what they see. But most people don't want to change. They want to stay the same and have different results. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. Why do you ask? Because I'm trying to figure out if I'm still the person I was before all this. or if Marcus and Diane changed me permanently. And if they did, whether I can change back.
Dad, you're not the same person. You can't be. You went through something traumatic and survived it. That changes you, but you're not broken. You're just
different. And maybe different is okay. Maybe. Are you going to be all right? I looked at my reflection in the gallery window, saw a man in his 50s, still standing, still breathing, still trying to figure out what came next. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Eventually, that night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I cooked a real meal. Not takeout, not microwave leftovers, not a protein bar eaten standing at the kitchen counter. An actual meal pasta carbonara from a recipe I'd learned in college. Garlic bread from scratch. A salad with the kind of dressing that requires whisking and faith. I set the dining table that could seat 6, put out real plates, real silverware, a real napkin. Poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than it should, but tasted like celebration. Then, I sat down and ate slowly, deliberately, tasting each bite, paying attention to the flavors, the textures, the simple act of nourishing myself. It was just me at the table, just me in the house, just me in this life I was trying to build. But for the first time since this all began, that felt like enough. After dinner, I cleaned up properly, washed the dishes by hand instead of loading them into the dishwasher, wiped down the counters, put everything away in its place. Then I went to my office, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not legal documents this time, not strategy or planning or contingencies, just this story, this record of how we got here. Because someone needs to know that survival isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's building a fortress brick by careful brick and hoping you never have to use it. Someone needs to know that love can fail you, even when it's real. That people can hurt you, even when they claim to protect you. That sometimes the only way to survive is to become someone you never wanted to be. But also, and this is important, someone needs to know that you can come back from that. Can find your way back to humanity after you've spent years calculating angles and building traps and turning yourself into a weapon. It takes time. It takes work. It takes mercy you don't want to give and forgiveness you don't think you have. But it's possible. I'm living proof. I wrote until midnight, the words flowing easier than they had in years. And when I finally stopped, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not the naive hope I'd had 2 years ago, standing in the gallery with a stranger who would become my wife, but something harder, more resilient. The kind of hope that's been tested and survived. The kind that might actually last. The divorce became final on a Tuesday in December. No ceremony, no confrontation. Just an email from Tom at 3:47 p.m., the same time Marcus had called me months ago. Though I tried not to see symbolism in the coincidence with a PDF attachment and a subject line that read, "It's official." I opened the attachment. Read the legal language that translated 2 years of marriage into paragraphs of whereas and therefore and heretofore. Saw both signatures mine from weeks ago, Diane's from yesterday. Saw the judge's stamp, making it official. Robert Hartley and Diane Hartley were no longer married. I was single again at 53, starting over, again. I closed my laptop and sat very still in my home office, waiting to feel something. Relief, maybe, or sadness, or the kind of bittersweet nostalgia that's supposed to accompany endings. Instead, I just felt quiet. Not empty, not numb, just quiet. Like a house after guests have left, and you're finally alone with the silence. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "I saw the papers came through. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you find happiness, Robert. You deserve it more than anyone I know." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I hope you find peace. Give yourself time. You'll be okay." End quote. Quote. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Thank you for everything, for the mercy you showed Marcus, for being more generous than we deserved, for not becoming what he accused you of being." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. We'd already said everything that mattered in that living room weeks ago. Anything more would just be circling the same territory, trying to extract meaning from wreckage. Instead, I deleted the message thread. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just because some things need to end completely before new things can begin. I took a week off work after the divorce finalized. Richard didn't ask questions, just approved the time and told me to do something that doesn't involve thinking about any of this mess. So I drove to the coast, to a small town on the Olympic Peninsula I'd never visited, a place called Port Townsend, with Victorian houses and maritime history, and the kind of quiet that comes from being far enough from cities that people remember how to be still. I rented a cabin overlooking the water, spent my days walking beaches and reading books I'd bought years ago but never opened, and cooking simple meals that required attention and care. On the third day, I sat on the beach at sunset, a ritual I'd adopted without planning to, and watched the sky turn colors that shouldn't exist in nature but somehow did. An older woman approached, walking a golden retriever who bounded through the surf with the kind of unself-conscious joy I envied. "Beautiful evening," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "It is. First time in Port Townsend?" "Yes. You?" She laughed. "I've lived here 40 years. Still beautiful every time." She paused, seemed to be deciding something. "You have that look." "What look?" "The one people get when they're trying to figure out who they are after being someone else for too long. Seen it plenty over the years. This town attracts people in transition." I smiled despite myself. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there. I came here after my divorce in '84. Thought I'd stay a few months. Never left." She gestured to her dog. "This is Winston. He's an excellent listener if you need to talk. Never judges, never gives advice. Just listens." "I appreciate that. I'm Robert." "Margaret. And I mean it about Winston. Sometimes what we need isn't answers, just someone or something that'll sit with us while we figure it out ourselves." She smiled, called to her dog, and continued down the beach. I sat there thinking about her words, about the difference between answers and presence, about how I'd spent 2 years looking for the right strategy, the perfect defense, the calculated response to every threat, when maybe what I'd needed all along was just someone to sit with me in the silence and let me be uncertain. On the 5th day, I drove to a small bookstore in town, the kind with narrow aisles and random piles, and a cat sleeping in the window who judged everyone who entered. The owner, a man in his 70s with wild gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked up from behind the counter. "Help you find something? I don't know what I'm looking for. Best way to shop for books. The right one will find you." I wandered through the stacks, pulling out titles at random. A novel about a man rebuilding his life after disaster. A memoir about forgiveness. A book of poetry that seemed too earnest but somehow called to me anyway. In the back corner, in a section labeled Philosophy Practical, I found a thin volume with a plain cover, The Art of Beginning Again. I opened it to a random page. We think of beginnings as fresh starts, blank slates, new chapters, but real beginnings are rarely clean. They're messy. They carry the weight of everything that came before. The question isn't how to start fresh. It's how to start anyway, carrying all that weight and still move forward. I bought the book without reading any further. I returned home on a Sunday evening to find a package on my doorstep. No return address, just my name in handwriting I recognized, Diane's. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. Inside was a framed photo, me and Diane on our wedding day, laughing at something someone had said, caught in a moment of genuine happiness. Beneath it, a note in her handwriting. "Robert, I found this while packing up the house. I thought you might want it. Not to hold on to what was, but to remember that it was real, that we were real, even if we couldn't make it last. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I'm sorry I couldn't do the same for you. D." I looked at the photo for a long time, at the man I'd been hopeful, open, believing that love could overcome obstacles if you just tried hard enough. That man seemed very far away now. But maybe, I thought, he wasn't gone completely. Maybe he was just resting, healing, waiting for it to be safe enough to come out again. I set the photo on a shelf in my living room. Not prominently, not hidden, just there. Part of the landscape of this new life I was building. The next morning, I called my daughters. "Dad," Sarah answered, Jessica's voice echoing in the background. "We're on speaker. What's up?" "I need to tell you both something." "Oh God, what now?" Jessica said. "Please tell me no one else has been arrested." "Nothing like that. I wanted to say thank you for flying out when I needed you, for not judging me for the choices I made, for reminding me that I'm not just this thing that happened to me." Silence on the other end. Then Sarah's voice, thick with emotion. "Dad, you don't have to thank us. I know, but I want to. You two are the best thing I've ever done, and I don't tell you that enough." "You're going to make me cry at work," Jessica said. "Stop being emotionally mature. It's weird. I'm trying something new, being the person I actually am, instead of the person I needed to be to survive." "Well, we like this version," Sarah said. "I'm trying." After we hung up, I sat in my leather chair, the one that was supposed to bring me joy, and finally, slowly, was starting to, and thought about the difference between surviving and living. Surviving is reaction, defense, calculated moves to prevent disaster. Living is something else. It's choosing. It's risk. It's opening yourself up to the possibility of pain, because the alternative, staying closed, staying safe, staying alone, is worse. I'd been surviving for 2 years. Maybe it was time to try living again. That evening, I pulled out my laptop and opened the document where I'd been writing this story. 8 chapters documenting everything that had happened. The trap, the betrayal, the mercy, the aftermath. I read through it all, and I realized something. This wasn't just a record of what happened. It was a processing, a working through, a way of making sense of chaos by putting it into words. And now it was almost complete. One more chapter. One more piece of the story. Not the end, because life doesn't have neat endings, but a closing. A place to say, this is where I was. This is what happened. This is who I am now. I started typing, and the words came easier than they ever had before, because I wasn't writing out of anger anymore, or pain, or the need to justify or explain or defend. I was writing because I had something to say, not about revenge or strategy or the careful dismantling of someone else's attack, about what comes after, about rebuilding, about the quiet work of becoming human again after you've spent years becoming something else. Outside my window, December rain began to fall. The soft kind, the kind that nourishes rather than drowns. I wrote through the evening, through the rain, through the slow transformation from surviving to living. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like myself again. Not the person I'd been before all this. Not the person I'd become to survive it. But someone new. Someone who'd been through fire and come out the other side. Scarred but whole. Damaged but functional. Tired but still standing. Someone who could look at what happened and say, I survived that. And if I survived that, I can survive anything. Someone who could finally, tentatively, begin again. 6 months later, I returned to the gallery. It had reopened in March, as promised. New exhibits, same vision. The abstract painting Diane had cried in front of was gone, replaced by a series of photographs depicting empty spaces, abandoned houses, vacant lots, rooms waiting to be filled. I stood in front of one, a kitchen with sunlight streaming through windows, everything clean and bare and full of potential, and felt something settle inside me. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice beside me, a woman, late 40s maybe, with kind eyes and paint stains on her jeans. The way empty spaces aren't really empty. They're just ready. Ready for what? Whatever comes next. That's the scary part. And the exciting part. She smiled. Sorry, I'm Sarah, the artist. I tend to ambush people and force my philosophy on them. Robert, and I don't mind. We talked for 20 minutes about art, about empty spaces and new beginnings, about how the hardest part of starting over isn't the starting, it's believing you deserve to try again. When she mentioned she was getting coffee after the gallery closed, I almost said no, almost walked away, almost chose safety over possibility. But I didn't. I'd like that, I said instead. Tom called that evening while I was getting ready. Marcus is up for early release, he said without preamble. Good behavior. Could be out in 18 months instead of 5 years. Thought you should know. I waited for the anger. The resentment. The old defensive calculations. They didn't come. That's good, I said. He's young. He has time to rebuild. You're serious? I am. What he did to me, it happened. It hurt. But I'm not going to carry it forever. I survived it. That's enough. Tom was quiet for a moment. You know what? You're going to be okay, Robert. I know. I met Sarah at the coffee shop, the same one I'd taken Diane to 2 years ago. Different person, different context, different version of myself. We talked about everything and nothing, her art, my work, the way life has a habit of falling apart just before it comes together. We laughed. We were honest. We didn't perform for each other. And when she asked if I'd like to see her studio sometime, I said yes. Not because I was ready for another relationship, not because I'd healed completely or figured everything out or become whole again, but because I'd learned something in the past 2 years. Waiting until you're ready means waiting forever. Life doesn't happen in perfect conditions. It happens in the mess, in the uncertainty, in the moments when you're still carrying weight but choose to move forward anyway. That night, I sat at my desk and added these final words to the story I'd been writing. This is what I learned. Revenge can be quiet. Justice can be merciful. Survival can look like strategy until you realize it's just another word for refusing to be destroyed. But living, real living, requires something harder than any trap I ever built. It requires opening up again, risking again, choosing hope when fear would be easier. Marcus tried to destroy me. Diane chose him over me. I built defenses that worked, but the real victory wasn't outsmarting my enemy. It was choosing not to become one. I am 53 years old. I am divorced. I carry scars that will never fully heal. I am not the man I was before all this started, but I am here. I am standing. I am beginning again. And that, I've learned, is enough. More than enough. It's everything. I closed the laptop and looked around my house, at the furniture I'd chosen, at the life I'd built from ruins, at the empty spaces waiting to be filled. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed. And for the first time in 2 years, I slept without calculating the next move. Because there was no next move. Just the next day, and the one after that, and the slow, steady work of living instead of surviving. The story was over. The life was just beginning.